Oh, how about I fix that? There we go. How about that? Does that better? Now you can hear me. My apologies. Let me start from the beginning here because you guys would not have heard anything I just said because I was muted because I haven't finished my coffee yet. I'm sorry. I'm still working on it. That's why I'm a few minutes late. I wanted to get some coffee and I was talking to some. But anyways, let me give you a little backstory. I'm going to try to do a review of a atheist doing a review of a Christian. So it's a little bit of an inception there. And my video that the video that I'm reviewing is not the one that was viewed by another person who did a review of the atheist doing a review of the Christian. That was done by Trolley Dave. If you don't know who Trolley Dave is, he's with Answers and Reason. That video was really good. That's how I discovered this video. That's in the video description. Go check it out. And if you have subscribed to Trolley Dave, go do so because he's actually a philosopher, so he does a really good job at these types of reviews. I watched his first. I actually agreed with him on think everything that he put out. So, if you want to watch that video and don't want to watch this one, that's fine too. I don't care. But anyway, so let me give you, like I said, a little backstory. So this gentleman here, he's known as the Thinking Dutchman. I've had him on my show before. He's a nice guy. He's really, really smart. This guy knows his philosophy, okay? So that's another reason I want to do this, because I wanted to compare kind of what Creaky Binder, who did the review, that I'm going to be doing the review of his review of the Thinking Dutchman, from an agnostic point of view, right? From more of a philosophical point of view, because I happen to like Creaky Binder. I think he's funny. Yes, he's satirical. When I first watched the video, I was like, okay, is he really trying to be over the top satirical, or does he actually believe this? And I'm like, okay, yeah, he probably a mix of both. I mean, I think that he actually does believe what he said in this video, although from a philosophical standpoint, it had gross conceptual errors on Creaky's behalf. No offense, again, I have a lot of respect for Creaky, but philosophy is not his thing at all, nor is epistemology, nor is atheism. He got a lot of facts wrong. He stated things a little bit incorrect, I guess you could say, and like I said, Trolley Dave did a really good job pointing those things out. And I'm going to be pointing out the same thing. I'll probably go a little more detail about them, though. And kind of point out where I think maybe Thinking Dutchman maybe erred a little bit, and where Creaky Binder made a few errors. Again, I'm the agnostic, so hey, I know how to pick a side, right? So anyways, let's start this off. Let me know if you guys can hear this thing outside. I did fix all the audio just a few seconds ago, so it should work just fine. And let's see what happens. Oh yeah, and Creaky Blinder, his video isn't like. I keep on saying Creaky Binder, it's Creaky Blinder. Yeah.
Welcome to the channel. I'm Kyle de Lange and I want to help you see that Christianity is both reasonable and true.
Well, good luck with that, and I won't disagree. Yet, if by true you mean that Christianity is a thing, then yeah, I totally agree. It is a thing, although I suspect I'm already wrong, because you...
Yeah. Well, okay, so this is where I want to know if it's satire or is he really making that argument, right? Because that obviously, clearly, Christianity exists as a concept, as a religion, as people that subscribe to the belief that Christ was the Son of God, or God Himself, depending on your denomination, right? But obviously, that's not what the Thinking Dutchman. And by his name is Carl. He pronounces it Carl DeLange. DeLong or something like that. It's spelled Lange, so I'm not Dutch, so I don't know how to particularly spell his name. I know what his name is, but I was going to call him the Thinking Dutchman. So so obviously the Thinking Dutchman isn't one of those theists that thinks that religion is rational, that the belief in God is rational. I happen to agree with him. I think it could be rational. I think that any belief that is not consisting of a contradiction could probably be rationalized unless it's an irrational belief that's somehow properly basic, right? You can't rationalize certain things that are irrational because there's nothing to rationalize them with. There's no justification you can if you use such a justification, it would be circular. This is the same problem we run into with human problem induction, right? You cannot justify induction by use of induction. It's circular. But as far as Christians believing there's a God, sure. It can be justified. I mean, a 3-year-old believing in Santa, given his reasons or her reasons why they believe in Santa, could be justified. It could be a rational belief, right? Just because something is false doesn't mean it's not rational. Rational is how you got to the belief formation, how you tick that little box off in your belief, in your set of beliefs up here. How you in your belief, actually the set is called belief box, but the individual beliefs, you checked it off. How'd you get there? Did you get there by rational means? Did you get there by just blind faith, such as fideism, or properly basic belief. So yes, Christianity can be rational, sure. But if a theist says to me, I believe God exists, and that God, can create square circles, then I'm going to say that belief is irrational, right? Because they believe a contradiction. They believe something that is not possible logically, not just metaphysically, not just nomenologically, but logically. And so I would say that particular God does not exist, right? So I would think that if you hold the belief that A does not equal A, you're holding an irrational belief. My volume is half the... Is this better? I can turn up my gain a little bit here. How about this? Audio. Is that better? I jumped the gain. You probably get a little more background noise, but let me see that equals it out. Thank you, Bibble. So let me know. I'm going to be playing the video here in a second. So already, yes, we know Christianity exists. Okay, that's not the question. Being posed if Christianity is rational or not.
You use the word reasonable as well, implying that you think it's reasonable to believe in Christianity, aka God. Please subscribe. Wait a second, are you being serious? There's only one definition for the word atheism and it's perfectly fine.
Okay. Both of them are wrong. I'm sorry, Creaky. You are wrong, and the Thinking Dutchman is wrong. There are not 3 definitions of atheism. I have counted well over almost a dozen different definitions of atheism. Why? Because atheism is not prescribed by definition. It is not mathematics. It is not held to be prescriptively what something is. Now, it does have normative usages. We all know by now, and I'm sorry, Creaky, you're probably not going to like this, but yes, atheism in philosophy is normatively understood as the belief that God does not exist. You can also hear it as the theory that God does not exist, the dogma that God does not exist. And it doesn't mean, like dogma with the blind faith. The central dogma of biology is DNA to RNA to protein, right? That's called the central dogma of biology. So don't get all flipped out when people hear the word dogma. The dogma of atheism is that there is no God. Okay? That's what's understood in philosophy. And so when you say this, when the Thinking Dutchman says there's 3 definitions, well, no, there's multiple definitions. Now, again, these describe usages. How synchronically, meaning in modern days, is the word atheist being used? Well, it's used in philosophy as the belief that God does not exist. That's accepted almost ubiquitously. And in more lay circles, like the atheist community of Austin, they use it as merely somebody who does not believe in God, synonymously with non-belief or non-believer, which I've already pointed out has massive epistemic issues. I've already pointed in my paper that leads to semantic collapse. I think it's absolutely, it's not that it's not inconsistent in that way. I was going to say it's inconsistent, but it's inconsistent with the literature. But the problem is that it's inconsistent with atheists saying they want to be rational, and then they use kind of a dishonest technique by saying, oh, because we use it this way, that is the only definition being used, like American Atheist does. The one true definition. It doesn't work that way. That is dishonest, and I find that to be incongruent with atheists trying to be the critical thinkers, right? And that's one thing that I do get on atheists about quite frequently is stop doing that, right? What about reverse transcriptase? Say, you're so smart, All right. Yeah, the central dogma isn't law, obviously, right? It's just generally how can you get proteins from RNA from DNA? But anyways, or peptides, right? It doesn't have to be proteins, right? Just ligomides or polypeptides or whatever the hell they are. Because all protein is this long peptide chain, right? Anastasia Frida says, I've subbed to Creaky for a while. He can be very funny. Yeah, like I said, I'm a fan of Creaky. I hope he doesn't kill me. He's a mean-looking dude. But he just blindly parrots Aaron Rocket Head, Dilatority, the atheist experience in American Atheist. I agree with that. He is parroting. No offense, Creaky. You have no idea what you're talking about atheism. I would challenge you anytime you wish, and a friendly thing. If you ever want to learn about atheism and atheology in a much more studious way, a much more critical thinking way, and a much more atheological way, I will be happy to have a conversation with you. But what you put out in this video is just bad. But anyways, Anastasia says, I say parrot, I mean parrot. He's done it before. Yeah, I caught the fact that he's using the exact same script that the atheist experience uses in this video, and that's the one thing I'll be calling out. Yeah, no, this guy, no, Creaky looks like a totally nice dude, man. He's the kind of guy, man, let's go have some beers together, man. Yeah, no, like I said, I'm a fan of him. Just his philosophy is like ours. It's bad. It's really bad. But let's go on.
Unless, of course, what you actually mean is there are many different interpretations of atheism. I thought Christians didn't lie.
atheists make a distinction between two kinds of atheists.
And by the way, that's not necessarily lying. Look, when people put out some information about what they believe, that doesn't mean they're lying if they believe it. And especially when it comes to like definitions. Now, I do think there's certain organizations do lie. American Atheists lie. They lie because they are well aware that what they put out, that lack of belief is the only definition of atheism or the only true or correct one, is just nonsense. Everybody knows this. And they don't care. I mean, I've talked to Pam Whistle from the American Atheist. She was on this channel, or she was on the Non Sequitur show many times. And she says, hey, Steve, if anybody asks you about American Atheist, just let them know we are a political group. We are not a philosophical group. They don't care how people, what the word atheist is used in literature. They don't care. They want everybody to have that label in order to normalize it and to get donations and support the organization. That's just her words. You can ask her. I'm not making this up. This is what she told me to tell people. It's hearsay. I get it. But if you don't believe me, go ask her. But she definitely says they're not a philosophical organization. They just want memberships. Okay. I mean, but that doesn't make it so. It doesn't mean what they say is true, because there's a lot of atheist organizations, a lot of atheists, and most the ones that I know that are educated in atheology absolutely denounce this lack of belief atheism nonsense. So, yeah, Creaky is for entertainment purposes only. We're all for entertainment purposes only, I guess, right? Don't take anything what we say without verifying. Go check it in for yourself, right?
Atheists. There's the Gnostic atheist who states there is no God. And there's the Agnostic atheist who states, I don't know whether there's a God, but I just lack a belief in God's existence.
Okay, I don't know where people get this stuff from, except for they just find some stuff they Google on the internet, but they never go bother to look if that stuff is anywhere in any of the academic literature. First of all, the Gnostic atheist with a G says there's no God. Really? I only know a handful of atheists that put Gnostic atheists that say that that's what that is referring to. When they say they're a Gnostic atheist, they're not saying that because they believe there's no God. They call themselves an atheist because there's no God. Right? So the atheists that I know, the ones that are educated in atheology, will say there is no God. Now, if you want to call that Gnostic with a G atheist, okay, then what do you call an agnostic? An agnostic atheist that says I just lack a belief in God is logically incoherent or ambiguous at best. Okay, and if you don't believe me, go read I'll put it in the video description, but go read my blogs on agnostic atheist. It doesn't make sense. It's ambiguous because knowledge is a subset of belief. So if you just lack a belief in God, you cannot know anything about God. You cannot know God exists, especially ontologically speaking, right? I mean, you can't say I do not believe there's a God, but I know there is one. That makes no sense. Or I do not believe God doesn't exist, but I know that he doesn't. It makes no sense because knowledge is a subset of belief. If you know something, you believe something. So if you lack a belief in God, that doesn't tell anybody what your position is on the ontological status of God. It doesn't tell anybody. It's non-informative. If I say, what do you want for dinner? And you say you don't want chicken, that doesn't tell me what you want to eat. And so lacking a belief in God can be somebody who believes there's no God, which is atheism in philosophy, or it can be somebody who has no position either way, which is called agnostic. So agnostic atheist would be redundant if you just lack a belief in God and you don't have a claim either way. That's redundant. That's just called agnostic. If you just lack a belief in God and you're calling that atheism, then it leads to semantic collapse, as I've proven in my paper. And so you're just calling agnostic atheism at that point. That's just a semantic change. Or if you're using atheism as you would in philosophy, the belief that God does not exist, then you're just saying I am ambivalent or I don't have a position either way on my belief that God doesn't exist. It makes no sense. I mean, no matter how you slice it, atheists that use these terms together, these juxtapositions of agnostic and gnostic and atheist, are just parroting. None of them have any idea what they're talking about. None of them have done any reading on it. It doesn't exist. It just doesn't. It's not in the academic literature. Sure, you can Wikipedia it, and you can find some stuff that Smith wrote. You can find some stuff that Flint wrote back in 1903 when he wasn't even talking about modern synchronic usages or anything about atheism or agnosticism as modern day. He's referring to a normative epistemic principle. When he used the term agnostic atheist in Gnosticism, Robert Flint was referring to Huxley's normative epistemic principle. He was not referring to agnosticism as the psychological state of being undecided on the question of God's existence. And that's what agnosticism is understood today. If you say you're agnostic, like I am, that means that I have no belief either way. That's what it means to people that know philosophy. This is how it's understood. So if you're talking to somebody like, Grandma Oppie, and you say, hey, look, I'm not an atheist, I'm agnostic, he's going to know exactly what you mean. Now, if you go to the Atheist Experience, yeah, they're all convoluted as hell, and that's where Creaky, unfortunately, gets his information from. But Flying Dutchman, I don't know where you got your information from. I only know a handful of atheists that will call the position there's no God a Gnostic atheist, and I have no idea where they ever got that from. It's just silly. That's just called atheism. Right, so, hey, Lawrence, what's up, buddy? Out there, I see you lurking out there. By the way, if you guys are really interested in this topic, if you guys want to come in and kind of join, I am quite fine to do that. Just let me know. I'll put a StreamYards out there, and if you guys want to jump in, because I'm Aki Atheist. I haven't talked to you in quite some time, but let me know. The Gnostic Atheist, someone who's received by divine revelation the secret, hidden, mystical knowledge that no gods exist. How does that work in? I don't know. The actual Gnostic Atheist would probably be more along the lines of somebody who denies the existence, or at least the power of Yaldabaoth, which was the original god that created all of materialism. Everything, the world we live in was Yaldabaoth in Gnostic literature, which eventually became Yahweh. And so this was a story in the Gnostics that they believed that Jesus was a messenger that had the information of how to get back to the divine and obtain apotheosis. And say basically that the knowledge of the one original, or the unknown God, as it was called, was lost by man. And Yaldabaoth, when he created the Adam and Eve and created the Garden of Eden, he had a tree of knowledge. And that knowledge was there was another God called that unknown God that created the heavens, called Plamora. And the story goes that Sophia, in the Pistis Sophia, she fell from grace. She was the feminine aspect of Jesus. It was called the syzygy of Jesus. That's where we get the term syzygy for conjunctions and opposition. She was the opposition of Jesus, physically, not as against him, but as in feminine versus masculine. The Gnostics believed in dichotomies, good, bad, up, down. They believed in things like that. So it's feminine and masculine. And so when Sophia wanted have her own emanations from the aeons, she fell from Plamora, and in doing so, she instilled this divine spark in humanity. This divine spark is known as gnosis, or at least to obtain gnosis, and recognize that this world that we live in now is just an evil trickster's god playing, malicious tricks on us, and that hiding the unknown God from us. That was what the Gnostics believed. That's what the Enlightenment would be. That would be when it became understood the knowledge that Yaldabaoth is the one that created everything, not this unknown God. That's what it refers to. In fact, Jesus was only trying to tell people, hey, you guys are living in this fallen world created by an evil trickster god, which actually, from what I have dived into, eventually somehow down the line became Loki, or god of chaos in the Norse mythology, right? I don't know. Hey, let me get a link for you, Lawrence, real quick. Do you know anything about the pseudographia? Just out of curiosity, which is the Pistis Sophia, the Nag Hammurabi Library, and things of that nature. I'm fascinated by Gnosticism. It is really weird how it just ties into the Christian aspect and all these different aspects, and it's a very interesting mythos. So let me get you a link here in a second. Just give me 1 second. Then we'll get back with the video. You know how I do with these reviews. They go all over the place because this is how I roll. All right, let's continue. Yeah, he may, the Thinking Dutchman may have got this somewhere, but anyways, there's two kinds of atheists. I've never heard any of this in any kind of academic literature. And I'm a little disappointed in the Thinking Dutchman because, again, this is not how you ever see these things used. If you actually go and, even if you do a Google search, you come up with all this nonsense, right? And we'll get into this a little bit. But every one of these is different. And again, in my blogs, I've shown how these charts do not make any sense. I don't know any epistemologists that would ever use such a thing. I know Bart Ehrman does, but he's not an epistemologist and he's a philosopher, and even he makes it very, very distinction that he's using two different propositions. But the problem is he's using the proposition P and Q, where Q is the knowability of God. This is not. And this makes no sense to have a diaxial or biaxial, multi-axial, when you're dealing with knowledge and belief, because knowledge is a subset of belief, so it'd be linear. These make no sense. And I'm sorry, but how many years have I asked an atheist to explain these where they're unambiguous or logically coherent? Not one has. Not one has so far. That's very telling because I've asked and begged, look, if you come up with a schema to make this work, I want to see it, but I just can't do it. So, all right, so let's continue. Mr. Lawrence, what's up, buddy?
How's it going, dude? Been a long time.
Well, yeah. Well, you avoid me like the plague nowadays. I get it. There's no love lost, whatever. Who are you again? You still have a show?
Apparently I do.
I used to go on this guy's show to read the Bible with him.
Yeah, you miss it?
I missed what? I missed reading the Bible with you?
Yeah, do you miss it?
Yeah, no, I always had fun with you. Always had fun with you. Absolutely.
No, it's always a good time.
Yeah, we always had a good time.
Yeah.
Do you want to put me on camera, by the way? Do you care?
Oh, yeah, you can go ahead.
Okay. So what? Okay. So before I get more into this video, because you know these things take forever for me. What is your thing on the whole agnostic, Gnostic, atheist crap?
Well, I acknowledge that, like when people say that they're an agnostic atheist, I know exactly what they mean.
Do you? Because it has so many different meanings.
I do.
Okay.
Yes, I do, because I was that kind of person that would, like, I had rationalized it in such a way where it made sense to me. So when somebody says it, it still makes sense to me. Like, I know what they're saying. I know that they're saying that they that they don't believe in God, but they don't know that there's no God.
Okay.
So that's all that they're saying when they say it. So in terms of philosophy or epistemology, yeah, I would have to agree with you on all your points.
So let me ask
But
you this though: why is it when you see some of these things written down, that's not what they say for agnostic atheists? They say an agnostic atheist is somebody who believes there's no God but doesn't know it. What about those atheists who use it that way?
oh yeah, I don't know, but
Right? Okay, so it can mean different things, right? What about Gnostic with a G? Some people say it means that you're certain there's no God. Other people just say it means you know there's no God. And other people say it just means you believe there's no God. Those are three different things there. So I mean, which one is it?
You're definitely right.
Well, yeah, I've been doing this a while. You know that.
No.
Go ahead,
Yeah,
right,
you're
fix
definitely
this.
right on that. But I guess, like, if someone tells me that they're an agnostic atheist, I guess I don't really enough about their position is known to me that I don't really question it. 'Cause, like,
All I can glean from that without getting into induction and try to guess what they mean is that they're non-believers. That's it.
yeah, I mean, that's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, that's all I can get from it, which is okay, whatever.
They're non-believers who are who don't maintain certainty, I guess.
Or knowledge claims. But I mean,
Yeah,
look,
yeah, knowledge claims.
you can tell me you're a non-duck. I'm like, okay, great, you're a non-duck. I don't really care what people say they're not. I'm more curious what they say they are, right?
I
I'm
totally
not.
believe that.
Yeah,
I totally believe that you're a duck.
I'm not a Republican. I'm gonna put you in the corner up there. Now everybody can see your beautiful long hair. So I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. I'm more of a libertarian. So it's just like when I say, well, I'm a non-Republican, that doesn't mean I'm a Democrat. So it doesn't tell you anything when you say you're a non-believer. Now, sure, it narrows things down a little bit more. And I'm like, okay, you're not a theist, but I still don't know what your particular positions are. And that's where it's confusing, right?
Yeah, I totally get it.
Yeah. Oh, and because you're smart.
I don't know. You can say that. You can believe that.
They say you need more gain. Can you kick up your mic a little bit? And then we'll continue on the video.
Hopefully that's a little better. I don't want to, like, overdo it.
Oh wait, you have to be able to hear the video, huh?
Oh yeah, I don't hear anything at all.
Yeah.
In fact, this entire time you've been talking.
Well, you hear me, but let's see here. Let me do this so you can hear the video. So give me 1 second, because this is gonna mess up my layout. Because that way, if you can review it with me, right?
No, I'll give it a shot. I don't have too much time, but I can stay for a little bit.
All right.
Gotta go to work in like half an hour.
Let's see. Okay, now your picture is so small. I got it. Be 1 second, guys. Well, by the way, have you read the Gnostic literature or anything on that?
Oh, Gnostic literature.
Yeah.
I guess some, not too much. So where, like, they describe, like, the pleroma and stuff like that. No, I haven't really read that.
Is that how you pronounce the pleroma?
Pleroma, yeah.
Pleroma. And that was the heavens that Yaldabaoth created.
Yes.
Yeah. Which I find that whole story to be very fascinating about the how Sophia, and wisdom and all the other gods, and it's just fascinating. So, anyways,
Yeah, I haven't read too much of it, honestly.
do you think any of the modern Christianity has any of those types of mythos still in it?
Modern Christianities. No,
Yeah, probably
because
not.
I think that the way that the councils,
They got rid
the
of it.
ecumenical councils all went, yeah, I'm pretty sure that positions were upheld
Like
in the face of Gnostic and
like
other
the count
heretical opponents.
the count the Council of Nicaea.
Yeah, like Nicaea, like Ephesus, like Chalcedon. Yeah, there's a lot of them.
That doesn't mean there are different definitions of the word atheist. It just means there is more than one kind of atheist.
Can you hear that, by the way?
I do not.
Really? I'm sharing it with you.
Oh, I mean, I see the screen.
How about
Just don't hear anything.
just subtitle? So.
Why, in the name of Uncle Albert's trousers, is there a G at the start of Gnostic?
Okay. Hey, why is there a G instead of for the Gnostic? This guy. Hey, Creaky, you're Welsh. Do you know how you spell color with a U?
I'm sorry. Maybe the he is saying that. Is there a G at the start of Gnostic? I mean, yeah.
Yeah, he's like, why is there a G
I'm
there?
guessing that's just a joke.
Yeah, no, I know it is. It's sad. He is being satirical here, but I'm like, dude, he's Welsh, which is part of the UK. I mean, they spell words wrong, with a U. Color is not with a U. I'm sorry. I will just no, But yeah, he's complaining about the G, which is kind of funny. Yeah.
Even less sensical than believing in God. I get it in agnostic, you actually say it, but just cross it off and not stick it in there. It doesn't need to be there.
He's got a point. I mean, I wish you could hear this. I don't know why it's not. It would make it so much easier. Let me try this one more time. Share screen. Share screen. Oh, share audio system. I knew that. That's what it's got to be. Now you'll be able to hear it.
Most atheists who commented on my video like to call themselves agnostic atheists. Their point is that only the Gnostic atheist bears the burden of proof, not the agnostic atheist.
I think that's perfectly fair.
All right,
atheists who commented on.
I'll describe it for you, okay? All right. So, he's saying that all the people that commented just lack a belief in God, which again, I don't really trust atheists who say, look, I just merely lack a belief in God and don't really want to dive more into that.
Yeah, the position is just like I am unconvinced of it, and that's about it. And yes, philosophically, that's just agnosticism. So it's like whatever, man. Call yourself what you want. I don't care.
No, yeah, and again, I'm not getting after labeling. Again, I want to talk about philosophy, right? So if somebody's going to talk about philosophy with me and they start using these little games, atheism as a lack of belief, then I'm going to inquire where the hell they ever learned that from, because I've never read this anywhere, and I've been studying, I should use the word studying, reading about atheism for quite some time, and that's not what I find in the academic literature. Now, again, what you read by Docking, what you read by Hunty, whatever, Dillahunty, they're not philosophers, so I'm not interested in any of the kind of quote expertise they have in philosophy. I read the experts in philosophy, and just saying your lack of belief doesn't tell me anything, but you're a non-believer. That's it. That's all I can derive from that. Anything out is not logically derivable from first principles, because you have theist, you have not theist. If you're not a theist, okay, what are you then? Atheism and not theism are not synonymous. They're not the same thing. Now, they're synonymous as far as they're similar, but they're not the exact same terminology. And you cannot logically get from one to the other without a semantic substitution. So.
Here's the thing, I agree with you, but when somebody says they're an agnostic atheist, I just let it be, because I'm I essentially know what you mean. If they want to get into details,
I have to ask what they mean by it. I mean, do they mean there's somebody who believes there's no God, but they're not claiming to know, or are they somebody who is just agnostic? It could mean either, right?
Yeah, I mean, I used it as I don't believe that there is a God, and I don't know but I don't know that there
Okay, but
is no
here's
God.
here's the thing, as you know now about epistemology, if you say you do not believe, it automatically tells
No.
somebody you can't know or you don't know
No,
because
I get that. I
yeah,
get that.
right.
Yeah, I absolutely. I get that.
Now you do. I don't think Creaky's got that far yet. You know, because yeah, if you don't believe clearly, why would you add anything about knowledge? It's automatically entailed.
Yeah, here's the thing. Like at the time, if you would have asked me if knowledge is a subset of belief, I would have said yes.
Mhm.
But I wouldn't have made that, connection.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
On my video
Like
like
even
to
though I
call
knew
themselves
that.
agnostic atheists. Their point is that only the Gnostic atheist bears the burden of proof, not the agnostic atheist.
Okay, so there he's the thing that Desmond says is only the Gnostic atheist bears burden of proof. Now here again, he's using Gnostic atheism as just atheist.
Sure.
Right. He's just using his belief, not having anything to do with knowledge or certainty. Which again, knowledge is a subset of belief, and certainty is a subset of knowledge. And so, if you're certain, that means you must know and you must believe. So, I hate the fact that Flying Dutchman is using the term Gnostic atheist just to be atheist. He knows better than that. He knows about philosophy, but he's trying to do an internal critique of how some atheists have been using these terms. Right. He's doing an exegesis rather than eisegesis. So, and I get that. I do.
don't know that.
I didn't say anything to you. Did you hear that?
I did.
Yeah, she's all Alexa's all acting up. All right, but anyways, so we'll get into the burden of proof here. And I still don't know why you can't hear him. I'm sharing audio.
I think that's perfectly fair. All an agnostic atheist is saying is that he doesn't accept that God is real because nobody can prove it. And are you actually saying that some atheists label themselves as agnostic just to avoid the burden of proof?
All right, so Creaky is saying here that he's challenging the thinking atheist that some atheists just call themselves agnostic atheists to avoid the burden of proof. Yes, they do that. I've seen it. But also he says that that when he says it, he just means that he lacks a belief because nobody's proven God exists. And again, I think he's mixing up concepts here. Look, logical positivism went out in the 30s. Okay, the Vienna Circle kind of determined that verificationism makes no sense. It's self-refuting. Logical positivism has multiple issues. So what does it have to do with proving anything? You don't have to prove something to believe it. Matter of fact, most of what we believe are things that are unproven because proven is only found in logic and maths, right? So I hate that word proven because there's proof in legalese and there's proof in spirits and there's proof in epistemology and logic, and they're all three different uses of the word proof, right?
Yeah.
So, but they all get into the confusion of the burden of proof here, I think.
Well, the burden of proof is never on the person that rejects the claim. The burden of truth? When did I move to London? The burden of proof falls on the shoulders of the person making the claim.
All right. By the way, he's Welsh, so that's why he talks funny. He's like
How would I know?
you can't hear him, I know, but he's Welsh. So he has a very thick accent, man. Welsh are very, very hard to hear. Matter of fact, you ever watched Doctor Who spinoff? What was that?
I promise you the answer is no.
You don't watch Doctor Who?
I don't.
No.
I don't watch a lot of shows.
They had a spinoff, and there some of the characters were Welsh. And I had a hard time hearing. What was that series called? With Jack Harkness. Somebody in my live chat remember. I'm drawing a complete blank for some reason. But he says the burden of proof is never on the person who rejects the claim. Well, there's two errors with that. Can you point out at least one of them?
Is it that you need just a reason to reject it?
Yeah, that's one of the big ones. The first one is reject actually doesn't mean non-acceptance. The classical interpretation and logic of rejection and rejectionism is the Fred Geach.
So it would be a positive anti-stance.
Right. To reject means to hold false in logic.
Okay.
And that's the Fred Geach interpretation of rejection, the classical rejectionism. And so when you say, I reject something in logic and philosophy, because atheism is a philosophical topic, right? So it deals with ontological concepts, the existential nature of God. So yes, to reject means to hold false, which obviously I don't think if Creaky uses it that way, he would accept that. He would say there's no God has a burden of proof. However, even to not accept something has a burden of proof, which Creaky is not aware of. He maintains that only the person making the claim has the burden of proof, and that doesn't actually hold true.
Yeah, so if I'm not mistaken, there is still a burden of proof, but it's called something else, right? It's a different kind of burden of proof.
Yeah, it's called the burden of defense, burden of rejoinder, burden of refutation.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a type of burden of proof. And so when people say that the person making the claim has the burden of proof, that only holds true in certain instances. Okay, if, for example, you want to disprove a scientific theory that's well established, in the scientific community, there is no burden of proof in the scientific community to demonstrate or, quote, prove in the colloquial sense that evolution is true, or theory of gravity is true, right? These have already been established as true and confirmed models. The onus is on the person claiming that they're false. That's what they're talking about in science only. Okay, but as far as making a claim, if I say, look, 1 + 1 = 2, and you say, no, I don't believe you, you have a burden of proof to why you don't accept that, epistemologically speaking. To be rational. Does that make sense? Because
Yeah,
because
I forget what it's called. We went over it in my stats course. I forget what it's called.
Torchwood, thank you, Torchwood. I couldn't think of the name. God dang it, Icarus, Torchwood. Were you talking about onus probandi?
What?
What were you thinking about? Onus probandi means the burden of proof in legalese.
Oh, no.
Okay.
That's not what I'm referring to. It's like fucking it's like the standard thing that has been accepted, and like in statistics at least, you would have to prove something falls far outside of that range.
You're talking about the norm, standard deviation.
Well, no, the standard deviation is like
yeah.
Well,
I don't know what you're referring to.
Blanking on the term.
This established mean? I don't know.
Oh man. Okay, no, I forgot that.
Yeah, I don't remember.
Maybe someone in chat remembers what I'm describing.
We'll just call it consensus. The standard, the view of things, right? So, yeah. So, I mean, yes, in a court of law, the burden as the prosecutor to show beyond a reasonable doubt, but the defense still has a burden of proof as well to defend their client. It's again, I think Creaky gets on the whole side.
There we go.
Oh, the null.
It was null hypothesis.
The null hypothesis.
That's right. I was blank.
Well, the null hypothesis is what you're testing against to try to reject.
No, I know.
Right?
Yeah. But like you were just talking about in science, we only have evolution being the null hypothesis.
Yeah. No. But I find it awkward when people start using statistics in terms like null hypothesis, because you're not doing experimentation, right? In order to have a null hypothesis, and I took stats too, hated it by the way, but in order to have a null hypothesis, that is something you have to determine by experimentation, by your p-value, to see if you could reject that and find that your claim, your hypothesis, is more likely. But that's all done through experimentation, and which is, again, obviously it's a form of philosophy. It's evidentialism and it's empiricism, but we're talking about just justifying one's beliefs. And so if you don't accept something, and you tell me, I mean, we have a guy named John Richards, who's from the Atheist, the Atheist Alliance International, remember him? He doesn't believe A = A, ontologically speaking. Yeah, I kid you not.
I feel like, yeah, I mean, I can't even imagine what his argument would be.
Oh, you want to hear it? It's brilliant. I'm being sarcastic.
Okay.
It's short. No, he throws in a variable of time, and he says, well, if you have an apple, over time the apple decays, it becomes a non-apple, so A = not A. I'm like, dude, you're an idiot. Wow. You're just a flat out idiot. It's really bad. It's really bad. No, but he's serious about this. He's like, well, yeah, A = A, mathematically, but ontologically it doesn't work that way. I'm like, oh God. And he doesn't, you try to explain him Leibniz's, indiscernibility of identicals and all that other stuff, and he's just lost. And it's just like, dude, don't go, as an atheist or as a non-believer that falls into my camp, don't go around telling people that you don't accept law of identity. Right. Just please, for my sake, I just don't,
The burden of proof is actually a legal claim.
That Dr. Oppie's in the chat?
Well, he's not a doctor.
Was it? Oh, he's not? Okay.
No. Oh, wait. Ozzy. Oh, Ozzy. Yeah. No. I think it's Dr. Ozzy. Dr. Oppie. Oh, I would love. Oppie swings by every now and then. He just he's chilling down there in Australia. And just hangs out every so often. No, we got close though. Ozzy's right up there, I think. I mean, he's not as prolific, obviously, as Oppie, but Ozzy obviously knows his stuff. So yes, good to see Ozzy. It's been a while. I've been messaging him, and he's been doing his igloo stuff. So I don't know. He just ignores me. Anyways, welcome Ozzy. If you want to join, the link is in the video description. somewhere. I'll put it again.
In fact, I think Ozzy should join.
He never joins these things anymore, man.
Well, you see, look at Steve. Look at how beautiful this man is,
Dude, look at that.
and he's brilliant. He's brilliantly lit as well.
Do you like my symbolism? Do you know what this is from? I asked you. Did I ask before? I didn't.
Oh, that's
Anybody guess what this is? Anybody can you just see it? You want me to take it off?
You can show it closer to me, I guess. 'Cause I think I have a different.
Yeah, I'll take it off for a
camera
sec.
view.
1 sec. What is that symbol?
I have no idea.
Ooh, it is getting hot in here. Anybody know?
But anyways, yeah, Ozzy should join.
All right.
I actually do have to get.
All right, bud. It's good seeing you, bro. Invite me in
Yeah,
one of your
absolutely.
Bible things, man. I want to read the passage. Oh, you already done it. Where Jebediah comes home. Did you already do that one?
I'm sorry, say that slower.
Jebediah or whatever his name is with the daughter.
Jebediah?
I forget his name. Jephthah. Jephthah.
Jephthah. Okay.
Jephthah. You know I hate the Bible, dude. No offense, Christians out there. I just know nothing about the Bible. I think that story is just so bizarre. I can't get over it. And I asked a friend of mine the other day that I actually know one that I know in real life that I want to kind of start doing some on the street stuff with, and she's dating a Christian, and she's like, oh yeah, he knows all about the Bible. I said, ask about that, because she's like, that's in the Bible. I'm like, yeah. She had no idea. But anyways.
Yeah. So we are still doing the show, obviously. We are currently in acts, so we're way past Jephthah.
Okay.
Jephthah was
whatever.
in like judges. But it's so far, it's still pretty interesting. But the most interesting thing, obviously, Revelation, that's still to come. And I just finished my script, by the way, for my Suffering Servant video.
Awesome.
So that was a huge project. So hopefully that'll be out.
I'll put your channel in the video description after it's done.
All right, I appreciate it, man.
Yeah.
And I'll message you and I'll get you on.
Awesome. Milwaukee Atheist. There you go.
All right. See, man, I appreciate it.
Yep.
Have a good one, man.
Yep, you too. All right, link to join is in the it's pinned to the top. You want to come in there, Ozzy. So, and I don't know why the video's not playing on the inside stream. This is weird. Again, I do have it's set for audio, so let me try this again here. Ozzy, it's been a while. Hey, look at wow, man, you looking awesome, dude. All right, link to join is in. Oh, you got the outside going. There you go.
Sorry about that.
Yes, how are you? Do you? I'll put you on camera.
Very
here
well.
In a
How are
second.
you doing?
Let me put you on camera here for a second.
Sure.
So, because you're looking well rested, dude.
I'm actually exhausted. I had a very poor sleep. I'm tired as hell. I was out swimming, and I just had a big meal, and I'm actually very tired. And I was just brewing a cup of coffee, and I thought, oh, let me see what Steve's up to. And sure enough, you happened to be live streaming, so I was happy to watch.
Awesome.
Thank you for the invitation.
Awesome. So let me kind of catch you up here real quick, because I'm doing an Inception review of a review kind of thing, and
Right.
and look, I don't know if you know Creaky Blinder. The guy's great. I mean, he really is funny, and
I'm not familiar with it, no.
Okay, and this is kind of tongue in cheek at the same time. It's he is parroting the same nonsense I've heard multiple times. And so right now he's on the topic of onus probandi, making the assertion that only the person making the positive claim, which is typical of like an atheist and atheist parents saying that they have the burden of proof. Now, again, as I still think you hope and pray you still agree with me that anybody who has a position should have a burden of proof, epistemologically speaking.
Yeah. There's this idea that, well, you hear it said all the time that it's the person making the claim that bears the burden of proof. Yes, that's true. Anyone making a claim, anyone making any claim, is going to incur a burden of proof. What they're really trying to say is anyone who makes the positive claim, especially a positive existential claim, has the burden of proof. As if saying the earth doesn't exist has no burden of proof. A negative existential claim, denying the existence of something, right, incurs a burden of proof. If I say there's no Bigfoot, right, if I say categorically there's absolutely no Bigfoot, that's just nonsense. I have to explain why I think there's no Bigfoot, right? There have to be reasons why I think there's no Bigfoot. I can't just say, oh, prove there's a Bigfoot. I don't get off scot-free thinking the Holocaust never happened, the earth doesn't exist, there are no other people, and Bigfoot doesn't exist. And no, you have to have a reason why you think something doesn't exist. And very often that burden is very, very easily discharged. In the case of Bigfoot, there's all kinds of reasons why we think Bigfoot doesn't exist. There's no other critter that's like it in the animal record, in the fossil record. We should have seen a specimen by now. We should have seen one shot by a hunter, hit by a train, drowned in a lake. There should be corpses here and there. There should be bones dug up. There's a million trail cams out there. Someone should have photographed it in this day of digital photography. Nothing. All we have are like blurry old photographs and easily fakeable footprints, right? And we know that people make up crap like this all the time, from leprechauns and fairies to dragons to Olympian gods. Bigfoot or Sasquatch it just falls into the category of things likely to have been made up. There, I just discharged my burden of justification.
It's not difficult. And by the way, I use the same argumentation for that stuff. I mean, people say, "Oh, well, how do you prove there's no fairies?" I'm like, well, I'm never saying I can prove there's no fairies, but using the Conaham, images and the Sasquatch, people faking that stuff and all that other stuff, and that to me is justifiable that those beings don't exist. I make the positive affirmation that they do not exist. I just not merely lack a belief in Bigfoot. Bigfoot doesn't exist. And it's funny you mentioned that making positive claims, because he does make one coming up here, and see when you catch it. Because he makes a very positive claim, and I don't think he caught it at the time. But so he's talking about the legal aspect of onus probandi, which is, again, innocent until proven guilty. But again, what I think Creaky does is he mixes legalism, scientism, and philosophy and epistemology, and just blenderizes them. Because in different domains of discourse, different words are used differently, and you have different criteria for different things. So that's what I think he's getting confused there.
Yeah. Can I say a word about that before you return to the video?
When can't you say a word? The problem is when you stop saying words.
Okay, never mind.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. No, I love you when you're long-winded, dude. I can sit there and listen to you forever. Just do it. Okay. Talk, man.
All right. So you're right. Onus probandum is, it's Latin. It literally means the onus means the burden, and probandum means proof. And in law, there is a burden of proof. Why? Because it's a principle of our of jurisprudence in our legal systems, in Western legal systems, that you're innocent until proven guilty, right? And so only one side has the burden, the person that's accusing you of a crime, right? The state, or in the case of a civil case, someone has to prove the other person is guilty. The accused doesn't have to prove that they're innocent, right? We have set up our legal system in the interest of protecting people from false accusations that might not be disprovable. We set up our system so that it's one-sided, so that only one side has the burden of proof. But rationally speaking, when you're making a claim, positive, negative, or anything else, you have a rational obligation to justify your belief in that claim. So if you think X exists, or if you think X doesn't exist, or you think X is impossible, or if you think X is likely, whatever it is you think about X, you have to have a reason. It doesn't matter if it's a positive or a negative claim, right? First of all, positive and negative claims are interchangeable, right? And if you say God exists, that's the same thing as it's not the case that God doesn't exist, right? I mean, just stick another negation in front of it, and you turn
Russell demonstrated that
positive, right? There's no difference between these.
Yeah, Russell said that all negative existential claims are still positive claims.
Right, exactly. Negative existential claims are just positive claims with two negations. That's right. It. So it doesn't matter. There is, rationally speaking, no distinction between a positive and negative claim. They're all claims about reality. So if you think reality includes no gods, that's a claim about reality. If you think all gods are made up or all gods are imaginary, that's a claim about reality, that reality includes no gods. And if you think, oh, I just don't believe, well, why don't you just believe? Why don't you believe? Surely there's a reason why you're not convinced. Saying I'm not convinced isn't a reason not to be convinced, right? It's no more reason to be not convinced to say that you're not convinced than it is to say that you're convinced, and therefore that's why you're convinced, right? Appealing to your incredulity is not a reason for your incredulity.
That's rather circular, or at least even tautological. Because when I hear people say I don't believe because I'm not convinced. That's a tautology. You know,
That's completely empty.
Yeah, it doesn't tell me a damn thing. And I think what people confuse
I believe
is,
because I found that convincing. Yeah, of course you found it convincing.
Right, exactly. Right, exactly.
Convincing, yeah. And these are mirror images of one another. Now, in law, we set things up so that only one side in a dispute, in the contest, has a burden. We did that for prudential reasons, so that a person doesn't have to go to any huge lengths to prove their innocence. Right? You might not have an alibi, right? Maybe you don't have an alibi, but that's okay that you don't have an alibi. The other side has to prove that you did it. It's not enough that they can prove that you don't have an alibi. They have to prove that you actually did it. So one side has a burden in law, but we established that for prudential reasons. But as a condition of rationality and rational discourse, if you want to go around claiming that you're a rational agent, then presumably you have reasons. And it doesn't matter what your claim is, positive or negative, you have to have reasons. There's no rationality without a rationale, no reasonableness without a reason. There's no such thing as a belief that is just rational by default. That's a stupidity. And I don't know how people in the skeptical movement have convinced themselves that there's such a thing as a belief that is true by default.
Yeah, I don't get it.
Especially a preposterous notion.
Especially when they also argue that atheism is being merely just somebody who doesn't believe, which is non-propositional, which is non-truth apt, could not be true or false. And so there's a lot of inconsistencies and a lot of misunderstandings when it comes to these things. Because again, I do believe that it is indoctrinated. But I'm glad you pointed out Ballonis Barbanda, because Dr. Burgess Jackson's paper is very, very telling on rethinking the presumption of atheism, which was Flu's paper in 1972. And he points out exactly what you do, is that the reason why we have it for potential reasons is because there's 4 possible things, and 2 of them are judicial errors. 1, a guilty man is found guilty, which is good. An innocent man found innocent, which is good. But there's also 2 judicial errors. 1, a guilty man goes free, and an innocent man goes to jail. And we've determined as a society that the innocent man going to jail is more morally egregious, right? So that is why we've set that up prudentially. There's no such thing.
On the side of caution.
Exactly. There's nothing like that when it comes on the existential nature of God. I mean, if anything, the theist could make the argument where you should err. They could pull the whole way, Pascal's wager. You should err on the side of caution and disbelieve, which makes no sense, because if your salvation is based upon merely believing something out of, what if, that's a pretty shitty, petty God to me. I'm sorry, it really is. Why would a God do that? Why would a God say, hey, your entire salvation is this, hey, might as well just believe me, because why not?
Right.
It makes no sense. And by the way, as you know, I'm still agnostic, but I am heavily more moving toward the atheist position on a lot of things, at least as far as like very specific types of gods and things of that nature. Because there's just so much bullshit out there. I've actually been reading a lot more about Gnosticism, like the Sophias, Pistis Sophias, Nag Hammadi Library. Fascinating stuff, by the way. Fascinating. But anyways, let's move on here. So.
Legal terms, the burden of proof is on the prosecution.
Oh, wait, you haven't. I have to share this with you. I'm sorry. You're not going to be able to see it.
Well, I can watch it with a little bit of lag. I'll just mute myself, and I can watch the feed if you want.
No, then that would be confusing. Let me see. Share audio system. Live streaming. See, this is the video, and you should be able to hear it when I play it, but Lawrence couldn't hear it. So,
or the person trying to prove something.
Can you hear that?
No, I'm not hearing
claim
anything.
The burden of truth. Truth? When did I move to London?
So you don't hear any of that.
The burden of proof falls on the shoulders of the person making the claim.
Well, that's just odd. Why is he not hearing it? I have when it says share audio, so when I'm sharing it, it should share the audio.
Is there something in my settings I might need to change?
No, because there's a little tick box that says share system audio. I could try it this way, my entire screen. I don't care, but I just want the audio to work. Now we play it.
The burden of proof is actually a legal claim.
That worked. So I don't know why it doesn't do an application window. So I'll just do it this way. People know what you look like, so they don't need to see you. I'm more important to. Yeah, you look great. I'm serious though. You look really refreshed though.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just I have a new laptop. Maybe the camera's better.
Okay.
I have not gotten any younger, and I've not gotten any better.
Oh, no, have you looked at me? I cut all my hair off.
I noticed. I actually like the look.
I do too. I feel great, dude. We'll talk. All right.
And in legal terms, the burden of proof is on the prosecution or the person trying to prove something. So yeah, tell us again why the burden of proof falls on atheists. I feel like I said burden of proof a lot then.
The people who said I used the wrong definition and that therefore my case fails completely missed the point.
Now, I've said this so many times, but I'm more than happy to say it again. By definition, an atheist is a person who disbelieves or lacks belief in the existence of God.
Okay, so Ozzy, did you ever get a chance to read my essay by definition? He steps aside real quick. So,
Sorry, I stepped away. I'm trying to pour coffee for myself.
no worries.
Do go on. I'll be back in just a moment. I am listening.
Sure. So I wrote an essay called By Definition. It didn't get a lot of views, like 81. But I went in and I described basically, why there's no such thing as by definition for atheism. And I used mathematical terminology to show that, look, in mathematics, there's certain things that are prescribed, right? And so there's a reason why we say, okay, by definition, 0 factorial is equal to 1 by mathematical definition. But when you're using words change diachronically over time. And so there's no such thing as prescribing linguistic usages in general parlance. It doesn't exist. In fact, people have found trying to change the uses of words by force never seems to take hold. Things do that organically. So when Creepy Binder says, by definition, atheism is this, it's nonsensical to me. It's just absolutely nonsensical because there's so many different ways people are using these words. And again, if you look at other definitions, which Trolley Dave pointed out, like the Oxford reference says, for their uses of atheism, the theory or belief that God does not exist. That's pretty normative in all of philosophy. I mean, most papers that I've read have used it in that way. So when Creaky Binder says, by definition, an atheist is this, what he's really just telling you is that just some words are described this way as somebody who lacks a belief. But that is because the atheists have gone and tried to change these usages and let people know we're using it this way now. And things like Merriam-Webster, which are going to relate how things are used now synchronically rather than like the Oxford English Dictionary, which does more of a history diachronically. So yeah, people do use the word that way. Doesn't mean that everybody does, nor should you, or by definition. Does that make sense? Ozzy, is that? You ever read this?
Yeah. No, I haven't read that. I certainly agree that these forced definitions don't work. And I certainly agree that you can't settle an argument by saying by definition unless the other person agrees with the definition. When people are arguing like this, saying, no, an atheist is this by definition, you're arguing with someone who disagrees with your definition.
Right.
So what point is there in invoking your definition? The definition is what is at issue between you and the other person. So it makes no sense to simply invoke the definition. That's what they're challenging, right?
Yeah, look, when you write something, you can make stipulative usages of terms. I mean, it doesn't matter. It's again, when you're doing an internal critique of somebody's work, say, yeah, by your usages, this is logically valid. Let's talk about why you use this in a particular way and undermine it that way. But the problem is that atheism is normally understood as a belief does not exist. So anybody using that way in a paper doesn't have to justify that. I don't think. I mean, they just by saying, hey, that's how it's generally understood. I want to reach the most amount of philosophers and have them understand my paper in context. That's it. But I mean, like I said, I wrote this essay, and I know it's hard. You have a hard time seeing it. There you go. Poor Ozzy. He's having to see my eternal screen here, and it's all messed up. But it's okay. But I wanted people to see that. Look, it doesn't make any sense to say by definition this. You can say maybe in biology, by definition, humans have like certain properties that are bipedal. They're heterotropic by definition, but that's because these are properties we give a certain set to put the elements in the set what they have to have. But that's all again, it's just stipulative if you think about it. It's arbitrary, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's okay to. I mean, I don't want to suggest that it's always wrong to invoke that expression by definition. You can sort of sometimes remind a person, no, hang on. By definition, such and such is the case, right? Or by definition, this would rule out what you're saying, right? But when you're doing that, you're asking the person, consider what the definition is, right? Consider the definition I'm putting forward here. I'm hoping that you share that definition. And then if they don't, well, then you don't just keep battering away and saying that's the definition. They're challenging the definition. there's nothing wrong with challenging a definition. It's okay when the lack theists do it. They can challenge the definition, and we can have a good old argument about which definition makes sense to apply in any given case. But you can't just settle an argument by appealing to the definition, especially when the definition is what's at issue.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. I think the confusion arises when I say by definition, I'm using it prescriptively as mathematics, not as descriptively, right? When I say by definition, this is the case. He's using it, and as you just kind of used it, using by definition of how this dictionary uses it. By that particular definition, then this follows, and then you can talk about that. So I think it's a little bit ambiguous what somebody means by definition. Do they mean by prescriptive definition, this is the case, like 0 factorial equals 1, or they mean by definition, this is how Merriam-Webster's using it, and by that definition, which you can accept or reject, because I don't use those colloquial definitions when I'm writing my papers, right? I just don't use them. I reject them, right? So, I mean, I'm not prescribed by any specificities. Oh, by definition, it has to be the case, as I would in mathematics, right? I can't just arbitrarily start going around changing mathematical definitions at a whim.
Steve, can I interrupt?
Go ahead. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so this is not a substantive point. This is, first of all, I just need to say that I have to leave very shortly. I have a scheduled Zoom chat with someone in about half an hour.
You're a busy guy.
You know him, actually. You remember Michael from the Canadian Atheist? You've had him on.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah,
he's awesome.
He and I are having a little chat later, actually.
He's great. Yeah, good guy.
Yeah,
good guy.
I listen to his podcast with some regularity. But I'm wondering what happened to the other guest who was in the room just before I joined.
Oh, Lawrence, he had to go too. Lawrence.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
okay.
He's from the Milwaukee Atheist. You've been on his channel, I think, haven't you?
What's his name?
Lawrence. Milwaukee
what's
Atheist.
the channel?
Milwaukee Atheist. I don't know.
I don't think I have.
Yeah,
no.
You've been in a hangout with him on my channel before, like during a rum and coke night. I'm pretty sure.
That's very possible. Yeah. I don't think I've ever been on his.
All right. So before you go, I know you got to go soon. Did you ever read my other paper though? I sent it to you, the Presumption of Atheism by way.
Yeah. So you did, and what happened was I accidentally blew away practically everything that was in my Gmail folder, and it went by the board. And I didn't want to pester you with it.
Why not? I want your opinion on it. Could you please?
No, I know, but there were a couple of things. There was It was okay. I don't know if I want to air this out here. There was a reason why I didn't want to read it and give you feedback on it, even though you were very very flattering by asking for my input. Is I really wanted to hear your mind on it, and I didn't want to have my fingerprints on it. I sort of felt like I'd already made a sort of enough of an impression on you with respect to the whole definition of atheism question and lacktheism already, and I have enjoyed watching you over the years in this continued discourse on that subject, sort of feel your way around, figure stuff out.
You mean I don't just blindly follow?
Generate novel arguments, some of them which I thought were incredibly ingenious, which I hadn't thought of. And I just thought, well, why am I going to step all over this? So I was happy to sort of hang back. Also, I was just inordinately busy with a whole other chapter of my life.
So you haven't read it yet?
I have not read it, like not one word,
but
not because I wasn't curious. And then when I was sort of just poised to read it, I went back into the folder and I discovered that I had blown away hundreds of emails that I had put in a folder of like I need to catch up on a whole bunch of things, a pile of correspondence in my Aussie account, and I don't know what I did.
Well, I'll tell you what. Here's the thing.
Techno peasant, and I blew it up.
I'll send it to you again, and it has already been made public on Academic EDU. It has got. It was in the top 4.5 papers being read, which I think is significant because that means out of the last 30 days, that paper was one of the top papers being read. It has.
I've heard you say it. Yeah.
I think it has 800, something like that. It's pushing. Look, I've seen papers that I think are great that only have 1,200 views.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think
after years.
I mean, I don't know the substance of your argument in the paper, but I think the subject is sort of of growing interest and general enough in interest. That is, it's not so narrow and sort of insider baseball that's a more technical paper might not enjoy as many views, right? Like or reads. That's the problem. Like when I was in the field of epistemology, I would read papers that I thought were like fantastic, cutting edge stuff, and maybe a dozen people had read them. But that's because there were really only a dozen people with that narrow focus. And the question that you're you're exploring here has a much wider area of interest, a bigger swath of people are going to read it. So that, I mean, that's good. And obviously no one read it and thought, oh, it's not worth it.
I've had not one person rebuke it yet. Not one
Yeah.
person. I had one person write a blog trying, but their Venn diagram was so comically bad. I was like, sorry, I didn't mean to be demeaning, but I was like, I can't take this seriously. And everybody who read it was
I
just
think
like,
you did
so
a
bad.
video about that.
Yeah, it was bad.
Yeah.
It was so bad. Can you see this real quick? Is that showing your screen?
It does. It's a little bit small for me to read, but
All right, so you don't have to read it, obviously, but what I basically do in a nutshell is I define everything using logics. And by the way, Dr. Demi was going to read this. He hasn't had a top opportunity to yet, but I basically use the square of opposition down here, basically, which is Burdett-Jackson's approach, to kind of show that by using these types of terminological approaches, it loses axiological value for these words. That's my argument. The semantic collapse is that agnostic and atheism become the same thing. Therefore, the axiological value of using these terms are negated when they mean the exact same thing to the lack-theist. And I use it by Boolean logic. Again, like I said, this is all logic-based, which you know. So yeah,
we discussed this. I remember we talked about this. Okay, so you further developed this argument.
I formalized it using logic. The logic. Everybody who's read this says the logic's valid.
Well, I know the argument because I've heard you run the argument before, and talk about the semantic.
I wanted to and I formalized it using actual logic, and that's the big thing because. The logic is valid. Nobody can show the logic is invalid, which is the big thing. But also the premises are pretty basic. The premises are based upon if this, then what are the consequences? And it doesn't matter whether I'm using atheism as the belief. It is showing what if you use atheism as lack of belief is the consequences. And so I'll send it to you. But yeah, nobody's refuted this argument, and I'm very proud of it. Matt Dillahunty hasn't refuted it. Aaron Ra hasn't refuted it.
They're unlikely ever to read it.
Right.
I think. Yeah.
Right. But I mean, I had 150 some odd edits in this paper, and I had actual PhDs that knew logic. There's a diatheistic logic expert PhD in the UK. He read it. He was like, props to the author. He's like, yeah, he said it was a good paper. So I was flattered. So yeah, look at that, 749 views. It's not bad for a lay paper, man. I'm very.
Yeah, I mean, any philosopher would be happy to have that many reads on a paper because it's not uncommon to publish a paper, even an important paper, that gets only a few hundred views.
Right.
I mean, a lot of academic work never gets read by more than a dozen people, and which is a sad fact, but
I was thrilled I had that many, and that everybody who wrote me that does understand the topic said, yeah, you know what? I don't find any issues. Matter of fact, the guy that reviewed it, the PhD, said he had found no, quote, substantive issues, which basically means obviously nothing critical. We had one or two minor things that we had discussed, but it was just, to me, is it a valid argument is a big thing, and do you accept the premises? If not, then sure, we're going to talk about the premises. But I had people going, "Oh, your paper's wrong. Why? Because you use the wrong definition." That's what Creaky Blinded would probably argue. I'm like, that's not how you refute a paper, man. But,
yeah.
how much time you got? You got another 5 minutes at least?
Oh, I have like another 15.
Okay.
I just wanted to give you a heads up that I won't be able to get to the end of that video.
Awesome. Okay, so 4:30 would be. And by the way, say hi to Michael for me. Like I say, I'm a fan. I'm a fan of his podcast. Let him know. All right.
Okay.
So using the dictionary definition, Gnostic and agnostic is pretty much interchangeable. They both.
Well, no. He just said there that Gnostic and agnostic is pretty much interchangeable. First of all, Ozzy, you've read a lot more than I have. Obviously, I have not seen the term Gnostic ever used as an epistemic modifier outside of lay atheism, and I've never seen agnostic or Gnostic used interchangeably. The only time I've ever seen agnostic even being used is in reference to being undecided, at least as far as on the ontological question of God existing. Now, if you go back to Huxley's days, sure, these terms mean different things, but agnostic and agnostic are not interchangeable, but they don't mean what I think a lot of lay atheists think they're trying to use them as, or at least I've never seen them used as epistemic modifications.
Yeah, there's a massive etymological fallacy at work here. They think that they can just take words apart and look at the roots and think, oh, I know what it means. I know the context in which it's uttered. They do the same thing with atheism. Actually, they go atheism. It just means without theism, and they imagine that there was this word theism that was in currency, and then at some point someone tacked the a to it and it became atheism. They don't realize that actually the word atheism, athéisme in French, actually it originated in French,
Say that again. Atheisme in French.
Atheisme.
Yeah, atheisme.
Atheisme.
Yes.
Atheism in French. That the word atheism is originally a French word, and it came into currency in English. But atheism came first, and the word theism came after. Right. The root of the word was not atheism. The root of the word was theos, so there's an etymological fallacy there. You can't
Massive one.
Look at the word and break it down and say, well, this is what it means. This is what it's always meant. And this is what it has to mean now. That's just not true. And it's the same thing with agnostic. And I've heard you go on at length about this, so I'm not going to repeat the point. But agnostic does not, the word Gnostic and agnostic, the word agnostic was coined by Huxley. It was not used before him as a kind of adjective or modifier on belief. And nor was the word Gnostic.
Neither.
It's just not what a Gnostic was. A 2nd century Christian who had some kind of revealed mystical knowledge. I mean, that's what it was.
Yeah, it's one of the first.
It didn't just mean to know. It didn't mean. It comes from the Greek word gnosis, which means to know. But a Gnostic and Gnosticism did not mean to know and knowing.
Right.
That's not what it meant. It referred to a sect and a particular spiritual enlightened view, and he was using it to mean someone who was undecided on a question and could arrive at no conclusion, and in his own particular case thought no one could arrive at a rational conclusion on the question of God's existence one way or the other, right? And so his agnosticism, Huxleyan agnosticism, as some people call it, was actually a very strong form of agnosticism, a form of agnosticism that I think is actually hard to defend. Because it was the view that not only was any theism, that is belief in God, unwarranted, but atheism was unwarranted, and always would be.
Yeah, that's why I'm not a Huxleyan.
God was unknowable. Not just you just don't have the argument now, but we never will. It was actually a very strong form of agnosticism.
Absolutely.
There are weaker, just sort of fence sitter forms of agnosticism where you're merely undecided.
That's why I'm not a Huxley
agnostic.
agnostic.
If I say I'm agnostic on the question, if I say I'm agnostic on a particular question, right? All I'm saying is I'm undecided. I'm not saying I lack knowledge, that I have some firm view one way or the other, but I merely lack knowledge. That's not what I mean when I say I'm agnostic about something. I mean I'm undecided. That's what it means. Inconclusiveness. It means indecision. It does not mean a lack of knowledge.
It means you're a fence sitter.
It means that, yeah, exactly.
Which is fine with that.
And sometimes that's the rational position, right?
Yeah, I got no. Look, and here's the thing. Look, I understand why there was Huxley agnostics. I've only met a handful of Huxley agnostics. There's not a lot of them I've seen.
No, it's a hard claim.
It is hard to defend. And he didn't use the word gnosis. He used nous, G-O-N-S, and he meant it to represent the illusion of having knowledge. He thought that the modern day theist and atheist were both overreaching, not just as far as their epistemic claims of knowledge, but as their dostastic claims of belief. He felt that both positions were unwarranted, and probably even unwarrantable. So, very, very strong position. I don't take that particular position, obviously, but So I mean, when we're talking about the word gnosis, that actually referred to a special type of divine hidden knowledge from Sophia, who was again the syzygy of Christ, the feminine aspect, and when she fell from Plemora. And I hate. Lawrence pronounces it Plemora. Is it Plemora or Plemora? I don't know, but whatever.
I don't know the word.
It's the heavens before the great demerge of Yaldabaoth created material stuff. But I hate pronouncing that kind of stuff. But the main thing is that if you got to know this knowledge, you could become one with the divine. And understand the unknown God. It was a very, very specific type of esoteric knowledge. It wasn't just, to know. And to say Gnostic atheist to me is just butchering things to no end. But whatever. And by the way, the original atheos, not from the French version because it's two etymological paths, but the one from the original was actually referred to Christians that denied worship and divinity of the state-sanctioned Roman pantheon of gods. And so when people say, the definition hasn't changed, yes, there has been of usages, and the original uses of atheos was somebody who did not worship the Roman gods, and gods denied them favor. It was a fallout of favor with the gods.
And it didn't even refer to belief. It wasn't even that they
Nope.
didn't believe in the God.
They
It's that
denied worship.
refused to worship.
Right. It was denial of worship. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They
And
didn't worship, and that's what was dangerous to them, because in the ancient world, in pagan cultures, it was thought that you're going to bring the wrath of this pantheon of gods.
right. They were worried. They were scared for these people. Right.
Yeah. So it was important that you propitiate these gods that were easily angered and offended. And so everyone had a civic responsibility to worship, and you didn't have to do much. It might just be a matter of throwing some incense,
Give
in a
some
fire or
wine,
something.
sage. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
Burn a little incense or something like that. It's really all you had to do to propitiate the gods. You basically had to sort of, pay your obeisance. And if you did that, then you were fine. And if a religious group, and the Jews were notorious for this, and the early Christians were notorious for this, if you didn't do this, you could get into some hot water, and you became an enemy of the state. And so it wasn't even that you lacked belief. It was that you refused to worship and propitiate the gods.
Absolutely correct.
And this was a violation of civic responsibility, and it made people hate you.
Yep. Yep.
And that's how atheist
It could be,
most commonly used in the ancient world.
probably where atheists became, the original, atheists are amoral or unmoral or bad people or hated. I think they were scared. The Roman gods were capricious. They were mercurial. They were vain. They were,
Yep.
they were not good beings. None of them. And so you didn't want to piss them off. That's what they were scared of.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Both don't believe in God, but the Gnostic atheist is 100% convinced, and the agnostic atheist just asks for proof.
Okay. I don't understand what he says there, because the agnostic atheist just asks for proof. First of all, using proof and evidence interchangeably, which bugs me, but whatever. But he says a Gnostic with a G is somebody who's now is 100% has kind of some kind of surety and indubitability or something. And I don't see how that follows. If you're a Gnostic atheist and you're just holding that as position as what this video started was somebody who believes there's no God, well, how do you start getting into things like, oh, well, I'm 100% sure, I have certainty, I have certitude, I cannot doubt this. I think what happens when I watch these videos, Ozzy, is that they take one thing and they start adding all these other conditions to it. They start adding, oh, well, yeah, the Gnostic atheist believes there's a God. Oh, they know there's a God. There's a certainty there's a God. They don't doubt there's a God. It's 100% certainty. They add all these different levels of surety that I've never found anywhere. And it's so arbitrary that when I do talk to somebody and they say the phrase Gnostic atheist, I literally have no idea what the hell they mean. I can't, because it's so arbitrary. It can mean so many different things.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you listen to Aaron Ra, he's a Gnostic atheist by his definition.
He claims he knows there's no God.
Yeah, he thinks that it's
Right.
provable that
Right.
Yahweh, for instance,
Yeah.
that God at least is impossible, and not just that.
But he also argues by definition. He says there's no God by definition, which is one of the most dumb things I've ever heard him ever say.
Yeah,
But he has. Yeah, I have. He has.
Considering that some gods are defined as existing.
Yeah. He's like God. God cannot exist. Cannot, not just does not, but cannot exist by definition. He says this. He still believes rocks are atheists. So I mean, he hasn't grown in his philosophies at all. And it's unfortunate because, again, I do respect Aaron. It's a shame that, he came after me so hard, even though you've had such great conversations with him in public that are just still to this day some of the best videos out there.
I don't know about that.
Oh, come on, dude. The place is brilliant. Absolutely freaking brilliant.
No, we locked horns on this and related questions many times, including on the Magic Sandwich Show. And one of those is mirrored on my channel, actually. And it's really funny to read the comments about that, actually, because I don't go through and read comments on older videos very often, but every once in a while, one of those pops up, and it's always hilarious. People are very, very strongly divided. They either think I'm brilliant in that video,
or you're an idiot,
imbecile,
right?
And
I've read them.
Really owned me,
right?
And so it's actually always amusing to read those comments.
I get the same thing, man. My audience is either Steve. Man, Steve really does, have an interesting point of view on this. So that's a good argument. That's a novel argument. That's one thing that I really want to do. I like doing novel arguments, and a lot of my blog that I write are novel arguments. Look at like the Gumballs and God. That's a pretty, I wouldn't say super novel, but I mean it is, I think, informative. But my argument, the presumption of how the presumption of atheism becomes a semantic collapse by way of square of opposition. I think that's pretty damn novel. I've never seen anybody do it before. So
yeah, well, we've had conversations where we sort of we argued about the equivalence of these terms,
Right.
right?
But not formalized.
But it's never. Yeah, I don't know anyone who formalized it,
Right.
so I'm delighted that you did.
And I'm gonna send it to you today.
It redounds to your credit that you did it, and if you're the first person to do it, then I tip my
Well,
hat.
that's what I'm saying. I really hope you have a chance to read it tonight before you go to bed and just kind of check it out. You don't have to like dissect it.
How long is it? Because I'm unlikely to read it tonight because I'm exhausted.
It's 10 pages long.
Well, okay, that's okay. Maybe I can do that.
But it's not. But it's not.
10 pages that's full of logic and diagrams.
Yeah, it's not as dense as
it.
you don't look. You don't have to go through and manually check the logic. That would be.
Yeah, but you don't want me to read it tonight, and then people say, "Did you read Steve's paper?" And I said, "Yeah, I got a page into it and fell asleep."
Yeah, there you go. Good point. Whatever.
That's likely what's going to happen, and not because it's boring, but because I'm so damn tired.
I trust it. All right.
Which you can't get, which is probably why you're trying to muddy the waters when it comes to the definition of an atheist.
I'm not at all interested in giving the correct definition of atheism or to explain what happens psychologically with atheists.
Why bring it up then? Why point out that you believe there are two different kinds of atheists?
Well, there's a whole bunch of different kinds of atheists according to the I mean, the thing is this. He doesn't want to get into this whole what is the true and correct definition of atheism because there is none. It just isn't. There's what you want to use the word to mean to somebody when you convey something. I get this. I understand it. When somebody says I'm an atheist because I lack a belief, okay, fine. That's not how I would ever use the term. But when I start asking about other things and they say, well, yeah, I still believe there's no God, it's all bullshit, then why are you just telling people that you lack a belief? I mean, you're downgrading what your actual position is. And I find that to be a little dishonest.
Yeah, it really is shifty, especially since so many of the people that invoke that definition do so very cannily. They know that if they go so far as to say, I think there are no gods, that they're going to be committing themselves to a particular view of reality, namely a view that there are no gods.
Right.
And then they're going to have to defend that claim, and they're ill-prepared or ill-equipped to defend that because they're not familiar with the arguments. Now, what is funny is that there are a lot of atheists out there. Matt Dillahunty is one who does have arguments for why gods don't exist, and Aaron Ra is another one, and you will often catch them discharging the burden of justification, the burden of proof for their view that there are no gods. But as soon as you try to suggest that they have that burden, they lose it completely and want to insist, for the sake of everybody else who maybe doesn't feel so equipped to do so. They want to safeguard those people from having to defend themselves. They just want to be able to tell people, no, you never, ever have to defend your view. You only ever get to go on the attack. And I think that makes atheists look weak. It makes...
Absolutely does.
I mean, no theist has ever been impressed with that move and thought, oh, yeah, how about that? I have the burden of, most theists are happy to tell you their reasons, good or bad, for why they think a God exists.
Right.
And they don't usually shy away from it. And I think they look upon most atheists or lack theists as really quite craven and cowardly, and not in a position to dictate who is the true rational person and the skeptic. I mean, if someone pulled that on me on any other subject, I would say, whoa, you don't get to call yourself the skeptic in the room when you say the Holocaust didn't happen, the earth doesn't exist, Bigfoot doesn't exist, but you won't give a reason why you think those things are true.
Right.
If you think something is true, whether it's a positive existential claim or not, it doesn't matter. If you think something is the case, if you think something is true, then you have to have a reason why you think it is. And it doesn't matter. It's not a matter of you have to prove conclusively that something exists. If you just think it's probable that something exists, or it's probable that something doesn't exist, I want to know why you think it's probable, to whatever degree you think it exists or doesn't exist. I want to know, to that degree of probability, what reasons you have that support your belief in that degree of probability or confidence. Your reasons have to scale with the degree of confidence. And if you're not very confident, okay, then fine. You don't need very strong arguments to warrant a very weak claim that something probably doesn't exist, right? But certainly atheists in the online atheist activist movement feel pretty darn strongly about it, and will go around saying things like, gods are imaginary, gods are made up, gods are fictions. Well, all of those commit you to the belief that gods don't exist. Those are all ways of saying that gods don't exist. You can't say that God is imaginary if you think God is real. You don't say gods are made up or gods are fictions if you think they're real, right? It's to say that those sorts of things is to say that God doesn't exist. You're committed to that view, and now you're on the hook. And then turning around and saying, "Oh no, I merely lack belief." I'm sorry, but you are really playing hide the ball with what your own position is, and you're doing it so that you don't have to defend your position.
Yeah,
and that just makes you look weak.
it does, especially to theist.
It fortifies your opponent.
Gives them ammo. And it's so funny because I was on a Facebook group the other day, or not too long ago, and I tried to explain to them that very thing, and I said, "Look, Matt, I know Matt, and I can tell them right now, Matt believes there are no gods." And like, he's never said that. I'm like, "No, yes, he has." And I found like 2 instances where he was on the ACA. He says, "Yeah, I'm a positive atheist. I believe there's no gods, but we believe that atheism is merely a lack of belief." Okay, he was very upfront. This was an old video, but then I found another one. He says, "Yeah, gods are nonsense. There are no gods, blah blah." And then this guy's, "Well, you're just cherry picking." I'm like, "How am I You do not understand cherry picking. I'm not just cherry picking things that support my view. I'm showing you these are his own words. That's not cherry picking."
Yeah, it's not nitpicking. It's not cherry picking. Yeah, I know. It's
weird.
Yeah.
It's weird when they say it's cherry picking. I know, you got to go.
Yeah, it's 8 p.m. here.
All right, I'll send that to you when I get done with the stream, and take a few days to peruse it over. And like I said, I really do want. I'm thrilled. I'm even honored that you're reading it, but I really do want your input on it. Good, bad, or indifferent. But I think you're going to like it.
It's a little late to get my input on it, but I have every confidence that it's a good paper.
Yeah.
Anyway,
All right, bud.
I'm going to have this conversation, and if you're still on, I'd be happy to pop back in if you need me or want me here.
Yeah. We'll see. I don't know how long I'm going to go, but yeah, go do your thing, man. Good seeing you.
All right. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, thank you, bud.
Good night, everyone.
All right. Let's see. Yeah, Ozzy is just amazing. If you guys haven't checked out Ozzy, he goes by Ozzy Ramsey II. Go check out his channel. I'll put the link in the video description. But he definitely, the stronger atheists, the ones that do really well in debates, have all taken advice from him. I can tell you right now, all the big players know Ozzy. All of them respect him. The theists respect him. The atheists respect him. He's just somebody who just has earned respect in the communities all around. And he's been a huge influence on me, wanting even just to get into philosophy and read about philosophy more. And I'm humbled that he even drops by anymore. But anyways, let's move on.
Which there are, but I'm really not following you. You can't split hairs with a definition and then say you don't care about that definition.
Well, again, he keeps on saying the definition. Creaky, there is no the definition. Again, I've already shown you there are multiple different definitions of atheism as far as what describes what an atheist is, doesn't prescribe. I use the definition that Oxford Reference uses, that atheism is the belief or theory that God does not exist, or the theory of the belief God doesn't exist. That's what I use. I'm not allowed to use that. I believe that I am, right? I mean, that's what you would find if you go to take a course on this particular topic. But you would find, hey, if I want to go and study philosophy and I take an intro philosophy course, what are they going to mean if I read the word atheist in a paper? They're going to mean almost every single time by Oxford Reference. And again, this doesn't always apply, right? It's not saying it's always going to be this case. But as far as they are using the term, the theory of belief that God does not exist. Okay? And again, the course is going to probably use it that way. I don't know any coursework that I've seen that uses atheism as merely a lack of belief, because there's just many issues by using it that way. And why would an atheist want to have issues? Why do they want to look weak in the eyes of the theist? I do not know. But even though it does etymologically come to mean without, in more of a literal way, but it actually is not to be understood as without. The etymological usages was actually without gods. It was not that they didn't believe there was a God. They were out without the favor of the gods, as Ozzy and I talked about earlier. That's what they're without to represent in atheos. But in modern uses of atheos or atheism, A is not to be understood as without. Yes, I mean, obviously it entails it without gods. If you believe there's no gods, you're without gods. But it represents the negation. A is a not. So the Greek alpha primitive would be the negation of the proposition of theism, or if the proposition is God exists, the negation is God does not exist. So belief, God does not exist. That's how atheism is understood. That is how I use it. That is almost how every single philosopher that I've ever met uses it. There's only 4 philosophical names that didn't use it that way. 3 of them are now dead. That was Flew, Martin, and Smith. The only one that still uses it that way is Bullivant that I've seen. But Bullivant is a theist, not to degrade that, but it's just, there's only, I don't know any modern philosophical atheist that uses atheism as mere lack of belief. None. There might be, but they don't seem to write many papers. I've only seen even just recently one paper that used it that way, but even they did so in a very cavalier way. So, all right, moving on here. Again, moving on here.
That ruins your entire argument, if there was an argument in the first place, which, based on everything you've said so far, there doesn't appear to be.
Whether they just lack a belief or actively believe that God does not exist, it really doesn't matter to me.
Well, it clearly does, or you wouldn't be making this video, would you? And did you notice the linguistic gymnastics? Actively believe that God does not exist. I think what you meant to say was, do not believe that God...
No, this is not gymnastics, and this is where Creaky again makes huge mistakes. First of all, there is something called active or concurrent belief, rather than a concurrent belief, rather than a dispositional belief. We have things that we think of when we're thinking them, and then we have beliefs that we have that we do not think of all the time, right? Most of our beliefs are formulated by prior beliefs, so we don't sit there and reevaluate all these basic beliefs that we have, right? But we do have on-current beliefs, beliefs that we are thinking about at a specific time rather than being in the back of our mind. This is what we call an active belief. They're using active belief to mean more of a positive belief, right? I have an active belief there's no God. It's not that you're at the time thinking it, which is normally how it would be used, but they're using it as a positive belief that God does not exist, right? Which is atheism. Again, atheism in academia is much more, 99% of the time, used as the belief that God does not exist. So I don't know why Creaky is saying, well, I think you meant to say does not believe God. No. When I say the word atheism, I do not mean somebody who merely lacks a belief. I mean somebody who believes there's no God. That is how I use the word. And that's how I'm going to use the word because that's normative. That's how I use the word in all my work. That's how I use it in my paper. That's fine. If you want to use the term as does not believe, go ahead. But that's not what the thinking judgment was saying.
God exists, because that's exactly what a Gnostic atheist is.
Well, how does Creaky know exactly what a Gnostic atheist is when I've never seen any usage of Gnostic atheist besides lay atheist? These little diagrams with a multi-axle, they don't exist anywhere. I challenge you, go find them. I mean, this is what I don't understand. If atheists want to appear to be the critical thinkers and the enlightened ones against, Christianity and theism, they need to up their game. They need to stop using things that make no sense, like Gnostic or agnostic atheists. They just don't make sense. But they're in Wikipedia. So what? So what? If you go read the Wikipedia talk, even they are saying this is all dumb, this is stupid. Basically, they're saying there's no citations for this. This should be this and that. And the only people they ever even quote are Martin or Smith, and they had some significant issues in their writings. And even then, it wasn't in any formal writing. It was in Smith's book, A Case Against God. Atheism, A Case Against God, that he wrote in 1974. Look, it's not 1974 any longer. This is 2022. We have modern contemporary philosophy that has moved on since those days. And Smith's work didn't take much hold. He based his work on Flu's work from 1972. That was overwhelmingly renounced by the philosophical community. Flu's paper didn't get much traction. It wasn't until much later on you had groups like American Atheist and Atheist Republic and the Atheist Community of Austin and David Silverman, when he wrote Fighting God. It was all political reasons. Creaky doesn't seem to realize, maybe because he's Welsh, but the entire predication of why this move to make atheism merely a lack of belief was politically oriented. It was for demographics. That's not no conspiratorial nonsense. That's straight up the facts. You can go ask American Atheist this. Go ask Pam this. Go read their books. That's in there. I mean, they're literally saying they wanted more of the people that were non-believers to be labeled atheist for demographic political reasons to voting power, and they normalized the term atheist. Even though the agnostics were going, no, we're not atheists. Stop trying to put us in your camp. And even Oppie would say agnosticism is no more closer to theism as it is to atheism. And so when atheists try to pigeonhole people into atheism, they're being just as dishonest as theists. Stop doing it. Don't use bad techniques. Right? So, yeah, this whole Gnostic atheist nonsense, my challenge to Creaky Blinder would be, go find out where the hell these terms are used, dude, because I've never fucking seen them used anywhere other than lay atheism. I mean, sure, they're mentioned in passing SEP Draper mentions in passing, but he also says if atheists actually sat and thought about what they're saying, they'd be kind of relating it to theism, because they're just accepting these things by faith that they're terminological usages, but they're not. Nobody uses these usages. Again, when Robert Flint used the term agnostic atheist, he wasn't even referring to what we use these terms by modern contemporary philosophy. He was using it to talk about Huxley's normative epistemic principle, was basically the precursor to scientific method and dealing with evidentialism. So that's what he was referring to. So, Creaky, these terms, Gnostic atheist and agnostic atheism, are just nonsense. You're only going to find them on the bowels of Wikipedia, on very poorly written articles. And I would really hope one day somebody who knows about philosophy rewrites Wikipedia where it makes sense. Maybe like Draper could, or McCormick could, or Oppie could. They would probably waste their time. But the articles on Wikipedia are crap. Absolute crap. Let's move on.
A person that does not believe in the existence of God or gods, and they are 100% certain about that fact.
Okay. If you do not believe there's a God, when you say I'm 100% certain that I do not believe there's a God, okay, that's fine. Yeah, I'm certain I do not believe in God. Why? Because I don't believe there's a God. If I believe in God, I would be aware that I would believe in God, right? I mean, this is when theists say, based on Romans 1:18 Romans 1:18 through 20, they say that all men know of God. There's no such thing as an atheist, because all atheists know that there's a God, but they're denying it in their unrighteousness. Well, no, I don't know there's a God. I don't believe there's a God. And I'm 100% certain that I don't believe there's a God. If I believe there's a God, I'd be believing there's a God. So I don't know really what the point would be to say I'm 100% certain about the fact that I don't believe in a God. Okay, what really matters to me is somebody who says I'm 100% certain there is no God. That's more interesting. Right? Well, what are you using for reasoning of why you're 100% certain there is no God? Like a theist says 100% certain there is a God. Okay, why are you reasoning that you're 100% certain there's a God? What is the reasons why you hold a particular belief? Because there are theists who say I'm 100% certain there's a God. There are atheists who says I'm 100% certain there is no God. Okay, what are your justifications for it?
Actively believe that God doesn't exist. What a douchebag.
This is not about the definition of atheism.
Want to talk about it?
Because I'm sick to death of seeing religious people misrepresenting the true definition of atheism.
No, Creaky. It's not religious people, and nobody's misrepresenting the, quote, true definition of atheism. There's no such freaking thing. The word atheist is polysemous. It has multiple usages. In the domain of academia, if you go take an intro to philosophy course, atheism would be used almost every single time as the person who believes the negation of the proposition of theism. The belief there is no God. They're a person who says there is no God. Everything you ever read when it comes to the literature will tell you this. Oppie's book, Agnostic and Atheism, makes it very clear. Atheism is a position, there's a belief there is no God. He says atheists believe there's no God. Agnostics have no position either way. Right? You read SEP, Draper makes it very clear. Yes, atheism ought to be held as a position there is no God, and it is normally that the case. So nobody's misrepresenting anything. It's not Christians. These are all atheists, by the way. Dr. Oppie is an atheist. Dr. Draper is an atheist. Dr. McCormick is an atheist. Ozzy is an atheist. All these atheists are also philosophers who actually study the topic of atheology in some capacity and study the philosophical understandings of these words. So, no, this is straight up parroting Aaron Ra. Aaron Ra is the one that says, religious people have been misrepresenting the true definition of atheism. That's kind of his vernacular. It's wrong. It'll always be wrong. There's no evidence for that because it was actually atheists in the 70s, in the 80s, and early 90s even that went to Merriam-Webster to get them to change the definition to more of inclusive of somebody who does not believe that God doesn't exist. In fact, if you look at the earlier renditions and editions of Merriam-Webster, it actually has defined atheism as somebody who believes there's no God. I have all this. If you go look at the changes, Merriam-Webster at one time was somebody who holds a belief that God does not exist. And then all these lay atheists got upset. Well, that's not how we use the word. And you're supposed to, showing your definitions of how people are using the word, not anything else. Well, okay. So they changed it because, yes, some people are using the word to mean that. But that doesn't mean there's one true definition of atheism. It just means that some lay atheists are saying, yes, atheism, as we use it, are somebody who doesn't believe, which obviously leads to massive logical and epistemic and epistemological issues, which we've already got into. But they don't get into that because they don't bother. But to say there's one true definition of atheism is just absolutely wrong. And it's sorry, but it's intellectually dishonest. And I'm not saying Creaky's dishonest. I happen to like Creaky, like I said, but he's doing the same thing a theist is doing. He's just putting out stuff by fiat that's absolutely not true. And I would hope that he corrects it. I really do. Aaron never did. Aaron never corrected his shit. Other atheists have. They recognize that I'm right. They recognize that Ozzy's right. And they'll go, oh, crap. Yeah, okay, sure. Atheism is the belief that God does not exist, but I don't use it that way. I want to make everybody inclusive, blah, 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 demographics, like genetically modified skeptic uses it that way. Okay. I'm not going to say much about it, but to say that there's one true definition and that religious people are misrepresenting it, that's nonsense, because the foremost atheists in the world, the people that write the materials, they all hold it as the belief that God does not exist. So that's just wrong.
I'm fine with atheists who say they just lack a belief in God. I will not put a label on them. They are free to use whatever label they want.
I agree.
Why does there need to be a label for people that don't believe in God?
Why? Because there's 2 billion people alive, if not more, maybe 3 billion people alive that are Christians and Muslim, Jews. Probably obviously even more than that, but it's somewhere 3 billion people. There have been wars because of a belief in God. More lives have probably been lost over the years due to religion than sickness. Don't quote me on that. But I'm saying, as far as modernity, when people, commit these atrocities, millions and millions of people have died. Now, again, I'm being hyperbolic. Obviously, sickness is one. But I mean, but more people have died in the name of God than any other belief or position. I believe that. Right? And so, yeah, it does make sense to have labels for these things. If you have 2-3 billion people that hold a particular view, that's something worthy to have a label that describes this. And if you have a label that describes that, it has a label to describe people that believe that's bullshit. Because it is prevalent in society. And so I think it's just fine to have these types of labels. But you can label yourself as anything you want, but the person who says, I just lack a belief in God, but they call themselves an atheist, it's ambiguous. I don't know what the hell they mean by it. They could be an atheist or they could be agnostic, philosophically speaking. Both of them are non-believers. Or they could be a theological non-cognitivist, but that would be, even that would seem odd, because a theological non-cognitivist shouldn't say that they're a non-believer or non-theist. What a theological cognitivist would basically say is that there's no such thing to even not to be. There's no such set. Theism is not even a set. There's nothing to be a theist. That's how theological non-cognitivists will look at it. And so, sure, if you take like a little higher vantage point, you'll say a theological non-cognitivist clearly doesn't believe in God, but to them, they can't even get that far. They're like, I don't even know what the hell the concept is to believe in or not believe in, right? So you can't really, from an internalist point of view, you cannot put theological cognitivists into atheist. You just can't, because they're like, I'm not in any category. Those categories don't exist. It's like, are you in the set of or the set of not? What the hell is? I don't know. That's how it would be to them. So, yeah, sure, you can pick any label, but when you say you lack a belief, the next question I'm going to ask you: do you lack a belief in both propositions? Do you lack a belief that there's God? Do you lack a belief there's not a God? If so, okay, that's called agnostic in philosophy. You can call yourself anything you want, but it is a fact that a person who's undecided, who has no belief either way, that has no positive epistemic status towards the ontological position of God, they are considered, or would be labeled, if they so choose to take the label, agnostic. Okay, so I don't know what their actual position is when they say I just lack a belief.
I personally think it's really stupid. There's no label for people that don't believe in the Tooth Fairy or Santa Claus.
Well, because Tooth Fairy and Santa Claus are not leading holy wars against people. They're not leading people to throw people off buildings because they happen to be gay. They're not having significant impact on society. Now, Santa maybe does, because Christmas is a huge big thing, but people don't go buy presents on Christmas because they believe in Santa. Most people don't go around saying, in the name of Santa, I'm going to throw you off a roof. Unfortunately, because of religion, certain types of religion, they believe that you believe the way they do, or they will kill you. So yes, these words have usages. That's the whole reason why we have words. They're describing things to give meaning, to give connotation or denotation even to what we're talking about. So it doesn't really matter to people if you go around saying, yeah, I don't believe in the tooth fairy. Okay. Or the tooth fairy doesn't exist. And most people are not going to sit there and waste that much time with you saying, why do you make the claim there's no such thing as a tooth fairy? You should be able to justify that. If you make the claim there's no such thing as a tooth fairy, you should be able to justify that. I can justify it. I claim there's no such thing as Santa Claus. So when an atheist says, well, I lack a belief in God, but there's no Santa, well, why can't you say the same thing about God? What is stopping you from saying there is no God? So again, if you're just saying that you don't believe there's a God, but you actually do believe there's no God, you're being dishonest to your interlocutor. I think you're flaunting, Grice's maxims a little bit by not giving the most amount of information you can about a particular thing. But that's just me.
If atheists are fine to use whatever label they want, then why did you even bring it up? That there's more than one definition of an atheist. There isn't.
There is. Creaky blinder. Go look at Oxford reference definition. Go look at Cambridge definition. Go look at Rowe, Blackwell. I could give you a dozen different dictionaries that hold it as the belief there is no God. So there is different definitions. Like I said, it's funny. You only have to show one thing to be a defeater to an argument, right? If there's one negation to it, there's one defeater to it, it shows the entire argument is flawed. And so there you go. Creaky, this is Oxford reference. Atheism, the theory or belief that God does not exist. That is a different definition than the one you're using. It's a different definition than the one you're using. Here, atheist. An atheist denies the existence of God altogether. And it denies means to hold false, to believe that it's not true. So when you say there's isn't different definitions, well, here's two right there. There's two right there. I could show much more, but it only takes one. And so that's what I'm going to show right now. If you want to go see more, go look at my timeline. I got tons of them. But yeah, if you look at different definitions, and especially worldwide ones, in other cultures, they don't say atheism is merely a lack of belief. They actually hold that there is no God. So yeah, it depends on where you live too, what definition you use, if even in colloquial parlance. Because if you go to certain countries and you say I'm an atheist, they're going to hold it as you believe there's no God. So don't be so English centered, because there's other languages out there that are not English that to them an atheist is a position there's no God. So all right, moving on. So, sorry, Creaky, you're just wrong there, my friend. Just wrong.
Different kinds of atheists, granted, but there is only one definition for the word atheist.
I cannot look into their psyche, but I do have a problem with inconsistency.
You serious?
You started the video off by saying there's more than one definition of an atheist, and then say that you don't care what the definition of an atheist is, and now you have a problem with inconsistency.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with what the thinking Dutchman is saying. Look, what he's saying is there is multiple definitions of atheism. That's established. 2, he doesn't care which one you use. I don't either. Pick a lane. But if you do choose, atheism as a lack of belief, I wanted to know how you're avoiding some of the epistemic pitfalls with that I pointed out many times, right? But people are inconsistent. Atheists are inconsistent when they say, I just merely lack a belief, but there is no Santa Claus. Or I lack a belief there's a God, but theism is false. These are inconsistencies. You cannot say theism is false, but I merely, the key word merely, lack a belief. Because at that point, no, you don't just merely lack a belief. You're saying that theism is false, which means you accept atheism is true, that there are no gods, which would entail you do not believe in God or lack of belief. So again, there is something to be said about atheistic inconsistencies. I point them out all the time. You cannot say atheism is true unless you're talking about atheism in the ontological sense of there's no gods, right? Because merely not believing is a psychological state. It makes no sense because it's not truth apt to say true or false relating to God's existence if it now is predicated merely upon your personal psychological state. If your psychological state is you don't believe there's a God, that's not the same for everybody, because some people don't have that particular psychological state. So atheism is not dependent to be true or false on your particular psychological state. Atheism to be true or false is dependent upon if God exists or not. If theism is false, meaning that God doesn't exist, then atheism is true, that there is no God. In order for that to be the case, atheism has to be held as the position there are no gods, to be truth apt. And I think Creaky is unaware of this. I don't think he understands the logic behind it, that it just makes no sense to atheism is true or false if he's using it as a psychological state, which it would be consistent for him to do. But most atheists are inconsistent. They'll say, oh, I'm using atheism as a psychological state, but atheism is true. At that point, you're merely just saying that it is true you have a psychological state of non-belief. So what? That makes no sense to use atheism based upon your truth maker, right? Or truth condition. Is it a truth? I think I don't know if it'd be a truth maker or truth condition, because a truth maker is usually something ontological that makes something the case, right? The apple's green. The truth maker is that ontologically the apple's green. There's a property of greenness that makes the apple green. But truth condition is basically, somebody. Steve is taller than Ozzy. Well, that makes the truth condition is that it's measurable that I'm taller than him, right? So it's not so much a property intrinsic about something, or it's not something about a truth maker, about an ontological state. It is a condition that makes something a truth condition. So, yeah, I don't want atheism to be predicated merely upon Creaky Blinder having a non-belief. Again, I don't know what his position actually is. He hasn't stated what his position actually is. Yeah, Creaky says Steve's absolutely correct. I love when somebody says that. Absolutely correct when Steve says Creaky et al. Violate the cooperative principle in language. Grice would be justifiably pissed. I agree with you. I think it does violate the cooperative principle. And I have a video on that very thing, on the cooperative principle and Grice's maxioms, and why that I think that it deflaunts them, the maxim of quality, quantity, things of that nature. I think that when you're in a discussion with somebody and you're not giving them the most relevant, succinct information about your position, like you believe there's no God, and you're really telling them you lack a belief, you're willfully flaunting Grice's maxims. But I should point out that Grice's maxims are descriptive. They're meant to be flaunted in some cases. They're not. They're descriptive, right? He's describing what he sees rather than prescribing how you should be in a conversation. Now, I still use them. I think that because of the cooperation principle, maybe it's not prescriptive per se, but I do hold it to be something I use in my everyday discussions with people. So, thank you for pointing that out, Kimawaki.
That all sounds pretty inconsistent to me, but what do I know? I don't even believe in God.
If you call yourself an agnostic atheist and argue that you therefore don't have any burden of proof, then you should also be prepared to explain the reason why you put that label on yourself.
Well, yeah, I mean, sure, I want to know why you use the label too. That's a different question, though. What I want to know is what your belief is relating to God. You tell me you're agnostic atheist doesn't tell me anything. It can mean anything. It's arbitrary. It's a simple thing. And I would ask this to Creaky. Creaky, does God exist? That's it. Yes, theist. No atheist. I have no idea because I don't know. I don't take a position on it. And you're not saying that you don't know God, that for a fact God exists or not. What it is I don't know how to answer the question. I don't have a position on it. So when you say, does God exist? When I say I don't know, what I mean is it's ordinary doubt. I don't have a position. A theist would say yes, but an atheist would say no, there are no gods. So if you say, if I ask you the question, does God exist? I want to know your position on it, Creaky. If you say yes, you're a theist. If you say no, then clearly that would mean that you're an atheist, wouldn't it? If you believe there's no God, even under your usages of lack of belief, if you say there's no God, that clearly epistemically entails you do not believe. So if you answer no, there's no God, then okay, then I know your belief. If you say, well, I don't have a position either way, that's agnostic, not agnostic atheist. That's just agnostic in philosophy. So during an external critique, right? Not during internal critique, during external critique, that's how I would review what you're trying to say there, Creaky. I want to know externally what your position is. Internally, we can dive into that because I don't know what the hell you're saying when you just lack a belief. I don't know what your position is other than you're a non-believer. I don't know whether you lack a belief because you don't have a position either way, or you lack a belief because you believe that God does not exist. Those are two different mutually exclusive positions. And so the only way I can find out what Creaky really believes is by doing an external critique, not an internal. I hope people understand the difference there. Christopher Green says, are you a Platonist, Steve? I have kind of moved a little bit more away from nominalism toward mathematical Platonism recently. I generally just deem to nominalism because it's easier. But after reading more about mathematical Platonism and Quine's indispensability thesis and a few other things, I gotta tell you, mathematical Platonism seems to be the way to go. Even if I haven't fully accepted it yet, I definitely think that mathematical Platonism is probably a must in science. I do. I think if you're a scientist and a mathematician, it is going to be probably the case you're going to hold mathematical Platonism. Would you agree, Christopher Green? Thank you for that question. Great question, by the way.
Now, obviously, I can only speak for myself, but I really don't like the label atheist. And I know by definition that's what I am.
No, Creaky, you're not. Creaky, buddy, pal, you're not by definition anything that you don't want to accept the definition for. Because there is no definitions when it comes to polysemous words. It's just not. You accept the label atheist because you want to accept the label atheist. Now, if you want to say that you don't have a belief either way, call yourself an agnostic because that's what agnostic means. If you think there are no gods, call yourself an atheist because that's what atheist means in literature. But go with what you want. But even still, you can say, look, there are no gods, but I don't want to accept the label as atheist only because, you don't like the ramifications of it. Okay. But in philosophy, you'd be an atheist. But how you label yourself is your choice. Your choice. Christopher Green says, no. So you don't agree? Wait, what I said didn't make sense, Christopher? Did what I said make sense to you, Chris? Yes. Because if I didn't make sense to you, I want to know where. Mathematical Platonism is basically the belief that abstract objects like the number 2 should be held as something that exists. That they exist in some kind of abstract realm because they have utility in science, right? Mathematics is the language of science. The Quine's indispensability thesis would argue that mathematics are indispensable in science, and the only way that makes sense to get some truth out of them is if these things are actually real. Mathematical Platonism is the belief that certain abstractions are real. Now you don't have to agree with me about mathematical Platonism, but I'm just saying, Christopher Green, am I describing it accurately? That's what I want to know. Because these are just what you adhere to, right? I mean, or tend to. Some people want to be a nominalist. Some people want to tend to mathematical Platonism. That's fine. There's no right or wrong answer to that. This is what your philosophical leanings are. But I want to make sure that I'm describing it accurately. Okay, so he says, I understand what you said, but disagree. Okay, that's fine. Absolutely. Because like I said, dude, I tended to nominalism for quite some time, obviously. And again, I do think I'm moving into mathematical Platonism. But I want to make sure that I'm describing it accurately enough so if I do move into mathematical Platonism, I am justified to based upon what it actually is, right? Or how it's understood. So, but anyway, so Creaky, no, you're not by definition an atheist merely because you lack a belief. I'm sorry, that's just nonsense. Go read my paper by definition, my essay by definition. The link is in the video description. This is, as you would say in your lands, bollocks.
But why do I need a label? Most of the atheists I've spoken to that consider themselves to be an atheist only identify themselves as Gnostic or Agnostic when pushed by Christian apologists.
I don't think so. I've only seen them labeled that way when they have no idea what these terms are used. I have not met, and to this day that I recall, a person who uses the phrase Gnostic or Agnostic atheist that has any education in philosophy or especially atheology. None. Not one. Not a single solitary person. Bart Ehrman would be the only one, but I've never spoken to Bart Ehrman, but he understands these distinctions. But as far as anybody else, as soon as they say I'm an agnostic atheist, I'm going to think to myself they probably never read a book on philosophy in their lives. So, because it's just these terms make no sense to anybody who's ever read about these things.
Like this clown. And I think I know why Christian apologists think that if somebody is an agnostic atheist, then they've got some chance of convincing them that God is real.
Well, I don't understand that because, look, even if you believe there's no God, anybody has a chance to change their position given enough evidence. That's called open-mindedness, right? That is a virtue in virtue epistemology. So I don't call myself an agnostic merely because I want to give more things to a credence to a Christian that they're more likely to convert me. I used to be a theist, but no, that's my philosophical position. That's what I want to connote to people when I say that that I'm holding the position that I don't have a position on the topic, that I'm undecided. That's what I want to get across to them when I say I am an agnostic, right? So when they say they're agnostic atheists, they're not telling me anything. They're just not.
I disagree. The only thing that would convince me that God was real was evidence for his existence. What was it you said about the burden of proof? Exactly. It's for you to prove to me that God exists.
No, Creaky, stop. This is so egocentric, man. Why does anybody have an onus to prove anything to anybody? First of all, you only have an onus to prove something literally prove that's your claim. For example, 0.9, I'm going to go back to the whole 0.9 I'm repeating. 0.9 I'm repeating equals 1. Do I have an onus to prove that to you? No. Can I? Yes. Multiple different ways. Right? But I have no onus to prove that. I have an onus to justify it if I want to have a rational belief to myself. But if I'm just giving you my dishonestic state, if I'm just giving you an autobiographical assessment of what I believe and tell you, I believe 0.9 I'm repeating equals 1, I don't owe you a damn thing. Right? I only have an onus of persuasion, which is a type of burden of proof. There's a burden of persuasion and the burden of production. Again, there's no one size fits all. Burden of proof is not a singular concept, Creaky. Okay? And if you haven't heard burden of proof, burden of production, burden of defense, burden of rejoinder, burden of refutation, then you haven't looked into burden of proof enough. And so a burden of production would be something to bring a case against a court. A burden of persuasion is what you need to tell a jury or a judge to persuade them or convince somebody to believe what you want to believe. But I only have a burden of persuasion if I'm trying to persuade you. But if you're a theist and you say, I believe there's a God, you have no onus to anybody to do anything. You're just telling somebody your belief state. That's it. It's self-reflection. Do you have that belief? Yes, I hold that belief. Why? I don't need to tell you these things. And then if you say, well, I'm not going to be convinced, I'll be like, I don't give a shit. If I say A equals A and you say, why do you believe that? And I'm like, well, I have my reasons because, laws of logic and stuff. And somebody says, I don't believe you. I don't believe A equals A, like John Richards. I'm like, well, I don't care you don't believe me. You're a dumbass, but whatever. I'm not going to sit here and waste my time to somebody who believes that A equals A is wrong. That doesn't believe A equals A. They don't assert this wrong, but they don't believe it. They don't accept it. I'm sorry, but I'm not going to waste my time with that. So to most theists nowadays, when you say, I don't believe you, they're going to walk away and go, okay, great, whatever. I'm going to move the hell on. You're not doing anything to change their position. And nobody owns you anything to convince you of anything. If you want to go believe there's no God, go read the literature on why there's no God. Go read Mackey. Go read Draper. Right? Go read McCormick. Go read the academic literature that's out there, Sorbel or all these other just amazing writers about why they argue there's no God. Right? But if you want to convince a theist there's no God, you need to know the arguments. One, the arguments for atheism. And probably know why the arguments for theism are not good. Right? It's a lot of work because there's a lot of arguments. And so a theist knows absolutely nothing to an atheist to convince them, and an atheist knows absolutely nothing to a theist to convince them. Stop that. Stop it. Just stop. Nobody has a burden to prove to you anything.
Not for me to prove that he doesn't. I'm not the one making the claim.
Well, it doesn't matter. They don't have to prove anything by making the claim. The only time you need to prove anything is if you say, I can prove something, and then you have an onus to, but if you don't, so what? What's going to happen? What is the metaphysical ramification if somebody says, I can prove this, and you say, okay, go for it, and they say, well, I can't. Okay, well, whatever. Just move the hell on. You know what I mean? Come on. I mean, if somebody says, hey, I can prove the Riemann hypothesis. Okay, great, do it. Well, I don't want to. Okay, then you know what? Yeah, I don't believe that you can prove the Riemann hypothesis. I don't hold that belief, right? And if a flat earther tells me this, I'm going to be as far as saying, look, not only do I not believe that you can't prove it, I believe that you can't. I hold that active belief that you can't. Look, have you met a flat earther that even knows basic math? Not many. So if a flat earther says, yeah, I have proven the Riemann hypothesis true, you merely lack a belief that? No, you're going to think that guy's full of crap. You're going to be like, no, I hold the belief that you're full of crap. I hold the belief, the active that on current and positive belief that you are wrong. Big difference. And so even though you're not making the claim that there is no God, Creaky, first of all, they have no onus to prove to you anything. And two, you still have a responsibility, epistemically speaking, in epistemology, if you want to be rational, to explain why you do not hold a belief, and which he does get into, but I think his justification is very poor, and he does make a claim in his justification.
The moment you claim stuff like, there's no evidence for God, or evolution is the best explanation for morality and biological information.
Saying there's no evidence for God is a statement of fact.
Oh, come on. This is where Trolley Dave just kind of makes some brilliant points, which I absolutely agree with, and I've been saying this for a long time. Look, to say there's no evidence for something is a statement of fact. Okay, and he's stating this is a fact. He's saying there's no evidence for God as a fact, and so he has to justify that. That is a claim. That's a positive claim. I think it's absolutely wrong. I think there's evidence for God and there's evidence against God, and you have to weigh the two. It doesn't have to be strong evidence, right? There can be weak evidence for God, right? But why? Because I've read the literature. Doesn't mean that I believe there's a God. But to say there's no evidence is disrespectful and degrading, I think, to people that have studied theology. Because what are they studying? If there's no evidence to be had, what is it they're studying? What is it they're looking at then? You're literally saying they're looking at nothing. There's a difference between saying, I've seen what you purport as evidence, I don't believe it, as opposed to you have no evidence. When I say somebody makes an accusation against me, I say there's no evidence that has been presented, that has been shown that you made your argument. But if they present something that's unrelated, I'm also going to say there's no evidence. If I say, hey, look, I've proven the Riemann hypothesis, and you say, okay, prove it to me, and I say 1 + 1 = 2, that's not evidence. That does not change the likelihood of the proposition being true or not that I've proven the hypothesis. Now, in the colloquial sense, if anything is posited as evidence, okay, here's my evidence. 1 + 1 = 2, therefore Riemann hypothesis is true. That's my evidence. At that point, you can say, look, you're presenting it as evidence, but that evidence isn't evidential for what you're claiming. Therefore, it is not evidence. That you can argue. All good. But to say there's no evidence is absurd. Billions of people believe there's a God. Whether they're right or wrong, that is a fact. What is it? They have their reasons for why they believe. I was a theist once, right? I had my own personal reasons, my own personal evidence why I believe there's a God at the time. A lot of atheists are ex-theists. They would say, look, there was evidence. I evaluated the evidence incorrectly. My evidence has changed. Whatever. But to say there's no evidence, I think is completely dishonest.
It isn't a claim. Biological information, yeah, okay. But give me an example of one atheist saying evolution is the best explanation for morality.
A lot, actually. It is Creaky. I don't know why you would say otherwise. There's papers written about that. Is that morality is a secondary effect of evolution. Now, of course, evolutionary theory, modern evolutionary synthesis combined with simple modification, describes biodiversity, right? But it also has secondary implications. Why? Because man and humans are animals, and animals are social creatures, and we're social creatures, and we want to be able to get along. And so there's reasons why we have morality, right? And it does seem to be very heavily influenced through evolutionary modeling. It might be societal, but that societal still comes from evolutionary things. Matter of fact, Dawkins was pioneering this when it came to memes, right? Genes versus memes being passed down through evolutionary processes in society. Matter of fact, the whole term meme, which you would find like a comedic meme, comes from Richard Dawkins, believe it or not. He coined that. And that meme came from evolutionary biology. And that originally came from Charles Darwin, actually. In fact, The Atlantic wrote nearly 150 years ago, Charles Darwin proposed that morality was a byproduct of evolution, a human trait that arose as natural selection shaped man into a highly social species. And the capacity for morality, he argued, laid in small, subtle differences between us and our closest animal relatives. There you go, Creaky. So yes, it's not just atheists who would probably argue that, it's biologists. Because morality is a secondary result of evolutionary processes, I believe. Right? So, yeah. All right. More.
I've never heard anyone say that.
Well, then, if you've never heard anybody say that, you might want to read the literature more there, Creaky, because, yeah, a lot of people say that, and I hold it to be the case, too. I think Photo would probably argue the same thing, too, if I had to probably guess, because of reading his work.
Where morals come from? In there.
Or maybe the reason
Well, no, morals don't just come from in here. First of all, most philosophers, most atheist philosophers are moral realists. They do believe moral facts exist and they are non-contingent upon subjective viewpoints. I tend to moral realism. And I'm not an atheist or a theist. I think, matter of fact, believing in God seems to make moral realism more difficult, actually. I think atheists should tend probably more to moral realism because it makes more sense from an atheist point of view. But whatever. Because if there is a God, it's ethical subjectivism, which makes objective morality much more difficult to I think, justify. But morals don't come from the heart. Morals come from the fact that we want to be able to get along in society, I think. I think that's where they're predicated from. And so we've come up with reasons to have these moralities. And I do think they are moral facts. A matter of fact, even a moral subjectivist, a moral or ethical subjectivist holds there are moral facts. They just think that there is no moral fact of the matter that has an ontological component to it, a truth maker to makes it true. That's objective. They believe that's objectively held in the mind of the person who has the moral fact. And that could be in some, obviously. I don't think all morality is objective. Sure, certainly not. But objective morality only requires one moral fact to be non-subjective. And I think there's more than one moral fact that's non-subjective. But yeah, I think that it's an error to say that morals come from inside. No, morals have been developed through evolutionary processes because we are societal animals.
the reason is that you are not sure, but that you do think that God probably does not exist.
Yummy! I just love word salad. Atheists probably do think that God does not exist.
Well, I'm going to go after both of them on this. I have no idea what I'm not going to be generalized what atheists probably do or do not think, right? I could make the argument that if you label yourself an atheist, it is probably more likely you would tend to there is no God versus there's a God. I think that would be a reasonable argument to make, right? If you label yourself an atheist, I'm going to say that by induction, you are going to probably lean more toward there's no belief, no God, than there is a God. I think that's a reasonable. I think if you polled 100 people that are atheists and you say, do you tend more there is no God than there is a God? I believe that every single one of those atheists would probably tell you they tend to more there's no God. I don't think that's really unquestionable. I don't think that's really something to be really challenged. Do you? I mean, am I missing something there?
Bit of a weird way to say it, but okay. There is no probably. Agnostic atheists haven't been given any proof that shows them God exists.
Well, see, that's not right either. First of all, again, we don't know what somebody's been shown. If there's a proof there's a God or not a God, I've never been shown it. If there's evidence, I have seen evidence either way, but a proof means a logical proof. And I think that Creaky is using it very sloppily. I think he's using proof to mean evidence here. I don't use those terms that way. When I say proof, I generally mean a logical proof. But we'll do an internal critique, and by his uses of proof, he probably means evidence, right? So atheists have not been evidence that shows them God exists. Well, I think the word would be they have not seen sufficient evidence to convince them, right? I know a lot of atheists. They're like, yeah, there's some evidence of God, but not enough to convince me. Ben from Ben from Real Atheology, he's one of those people. He'll say, hey, this argument here, I would kind of lean that toward a tick in the theist column. Doesn't mean it's sufficient enough to convince me, right? But to say there's none, or an atheist has been shown no evidence, you can't speak for all atheists that way.
Agnostic atheists are sure God doesn't exist.
Well, again, how can I think it means agnostic with a G. I think maybe I heard him wrong. But a Gnostic atheist doesn't have to be sure there's no God. Again, we're not talking about surety. If you're in the Gnostic domain of merely beliefs, I don't care what you're certain or sure of. I'm not asking for that. I'm just asking what you believe. I don't want to know if you're sure there's no God at first. I just want to know if you believe there's no God. That's it. I'm asking your Gnostic state. That's it.
But they're still both atheists.
Now you bear the burden of proof, because this is not simply a lack of belief. This is actively believing that God does not exist.
That is such a disingenuous way of saying that. I'm getting fed up of saying this, but a lack of belief isn't a belief that something doesn't exist.
Okay. Creaky. A lack of belief is not a belief that something does not exist. That is true. But a lack of belief is still a belief, believe it or not. Now, I know Creaky's going to have a coronary. He's going to have an aneurysm. But don't, dude. Let me hear me out. I have an essay on this. Okay, it's called a secondary burden of proof, or second order burden of proof. And a second order belief. A belief about a belief is called a second order belief. I hold the belief that I lack a belief that there's no God, right? That's a position not on the ontological status of God, but an ontological status of my psychological state. So a lack of belief still holds that you have a particular type of belief. The belief that you lack a belief, right? That you don't have, and also it would entail that you have insufficient justification to warrant a belief in something. So when you say, I don't believe X, that is a belief about your position on the status, the ontological nature of X. It's a belief about a belief. It's called a second order belief. It really is. We'll go look it up. Very little literature on this, but there's some. But I long ago came up with my proof that a second order belief to be justified requires reasons. Agnosticism is a belief about a belief, right? It is the position of undecided on the position of God's existing or not. And so that requires justification. Michael Martin, who was a big advocate of negative atheism, the lack of belief atheism, he even agreed in his book, Negative Atheism. If you are somebody who is a negative atheist, somebody who is a weak atheist, somebody who believes they're not justified to believe there's a God, but doesn't assert there isn't a God, that requires justification. That requires reasons to do that. And I fully agreed with him on that. If you want to be a fence sitter like me, that I don't have a position either way, you need to have a reason why you're sitting on that fence, and you have not been convinced either way. Because if not, you're no different than somebody who says, I just don't believe A equals A. You're going to come across as irrational, or at the very least, irrational. Because I cannot in good conscience say to anybody who says, I do not believe A equals A, is a rational person. None. There's no rational. I don't know any way to rationally justify that, because you are holding on to a position that is incongruent with what I would consider to be a critical thinker, right? Because if you don't accept A equals A, then you're denying one of the most fundamental tenets of classical logic. And you just say, well, I don't have to give you a reason why I don't believe A equals A. No, you don't, but I'm not going to consider you a rational thinker, right? But you have to give a reason to yourself to justify it. And only you know whether you've actually justified it or not. I can't get inside your head whether you've rationally justified A doesn't equal A, right? Kimamaki says, moral non-cognitivism will still have to deal with the embedding problem. Yes, the embedding problem doesn't just magically go away. I think that Fred Geach does make a very good point that when they're trying to relate, hey, how do you make these non-cognitive positions something you can use in logical proof? I don't see how you can. I don't think they can be embedded. I think that things like prescriptivism, things like emotivism, and other theological non-cognitive or moral. Those are theological cognitive positions, but moral non-cognitivism, moral non-cognitive positions, not theological cognitivism, but other moral non-cognitive positions. Yeah, it is really difficult to put them into any kind of logical proof or anything, because they're not something that can be true or false, right? They're not able to be utilized in that manner. In other words, it can't be embedded. So, anyways, moving on.
It's just a lack of belief. Go and check the definition for yourself if you don't.
He keeps on saying that definition. What definition? Which dictionary? He's just using a simple Google search, but I'm sorry, if you look at the academic references, that's not the definition they use, Creaky. So when you say the definition, are you talking about Google's, or are you talking about Merriam-Webster, but you're not talking about Collins' dictionary doesn't use that. Collins' dictionary says the belief that God does not exist. Merriam-Webster's Learner's Dictionary says a person who believes in no God, that's an atheist. Atheism, the belief that God does not exist. That's the definitions they use. So if you don't, he says, if you don't, just go check the definition. Okay, go to Collins' Dictionary right now while you're watching this video. Pause it. Go to Collins' Dictionary, type in atheism. Tell me what it says. See what it says. Or atheist. Tell me what it says. Go look up atheist or atheism in Oxford Reference and tell me what it says. Because it's not just somebody who says there's no, they lack a belief. It is explicit. It is an atheist, a person who believes there's no God. Atheism, the belief there's no God. So when he tells people to go look at the definition, they're going to look at different definitions and see that Creaky's not correct on this.
You don't believe me? Or is the English dictionary telling lies as well?
Well, again, there's a lot of English dictionaries out there, and some of them are descriptive and some of them are not. Right? Some of them are some in-field dictionaries are going to be much more prescriptive. But again, the dictionary is just telling you how words are used. If you go to a different country and then you look at their dictionary is going to tell you how those words are used in those countries. And in most countries, atheism is a belief that God does not exist. I only find it really in America that this lack of belief, and it's starting to get in the UK a little bit more. But in most other countries, that's not how atheism is held. And I know I'm cut off here, but I'm not going to bother to change it. I kind of like this layout here. So
The theist is perfectly reasonable to ask, why do you think God probably does not exist?
yeah, I agree.
To which the atheist replies, because there's no evidence to show that he does.
But that's a claim, and that's not telling anything. Look, to say that there's no evidence is a little bit, like I said, dishonest. If you say, okay, well, what about, what is it that you first hold as your belief? For example, I still don't know if Creaky believes there's no God or not. I have no idea. He's not said. But to say there's no evidence, okay, well, what about, the argument for contingency? What about the ontological arguments, the cosmological arguments? You can say that they're not convincing. Sure, we already know that. You can say that here's the errors with them. But they are present them as evidence. And just to say by fiat there's no evidence, it's just dishonest.
Does anyone else feel like we're going round in circles here?
The atheist could respond, as many atheists do, well, there's no evidence that God exists. Then the theist can ask, what do you mean with evidence? And how do you know there's no evidence that God exists?
Yeah, I mean, you're making the claim. There could be some, look, and here's the thing that I don't think Creaky is understanding. There could be evidence there's no God. Okay, look, I got a flashlight here. I just pulled it off my desk. Right, here's a flashlight, okay? And I gotta get batteries for it. But here's a flashlight. So, if somebody says, hey, there's no evidence of flashlights. I've never seen any evidence of flashlights. Right? Or they can say, I know there's no evidence of flashlights. Well, here's a flashlight. They're wrong, right? Their claim to knowledge is incorrect. Their statement that there's no flashlight is incorrect. Their statement that there's no evidence is incorrect. So when somebody says there's no evidence of gods, they're not making a knowledge claim here. They're making a Gnostic claim, right? But it's easily changed by giving evidence, right? But that's a subjective evaluation. But then the thinking Dutchman says, how do you know there's no evidence? Well, that's kind of a Psi 10 shift right there, the Psi 10 shift. He's not saying he knows there's no evidence. He's saying at this point that he only believes there's no evidence, right? Because he said there is no evidence. That means that he holds a belief, right? The positive belief there is no evidence. That's a claim. That's a claim against the ontological state of affairs that nowhere in the universe is there evidence of God. That is a claim. That is a positive claim that he is saying he believes, right? I don't think Creaky Blinder was realizing that at the time. And, of course, Trolley Day pointed out the exact same thing.
Well, I don't want to point out the obvious, but
Please
no
do.
evidence usually means that there isn't evidence. And the reason we think there is no evidence is because none has ever been presented.
Well, again, that's just hyperbole. I know a lot of atheists that say, yeah, there's some evidence for God, but it's not convincing. You can't speak for all atheists, man. Especially the educated ones that understand these arguments. Because a lot of them will say, yeah, God's possible, and there's might even be reasons to believe it, but I don't hold that belief. I'm still convinced that there isn't a God. That's fine. That's consistent. But you don't know what has been presented to atheists. You're making now a statement about generalization about all atheists. Hey, let me ask my audience, for the people out there that are atheists, would you or would not say that, yeah, there's some evidence for God, but it's not enough to convince you? Would you say that as an atheist? Yes or no? No.
And as I've said many times before, if somebody can show me that God exists, then I'll accept that God exists.
Okay, but why is it about you, Creaky? That's about with anybody. Look, if anybody's shown enough evidence, they'll change their mind. But atheism is not predicated upon you believing or not. Theism is not predicated upon you or believing or not. So I don't know where this egocentrism comes from. It's not about you, buddy. Again, I like Creaky. I really do. I think he does amazing stuff. He's funnier than hell. His flat stuff's amazing. I'm not dogging him, and I hope he takes this in kind because I don't want to make an enemy of this guy because I like Creaky. But Creaky, this is not about you, bro. Okay? So sure, anybody can say that. Convince me there's a God, I'll believe. Convince me there's not a God, I'll believe. But that's just rhetoric. It's empty rhetoric. Because nobody has any onus to prove to anything. And if you're the only reason taking the label of atheist because nobody's shown you there's a God, that's a pretty weak reason to be an atheist. And it makes the atheists that I know look kind of silly because they're taking the label of atheism because they want to convince atheists there is no God. People that get into these debates with atheists, they're like, there is no God. Let me tell you why. Trent says, I consider myself an atheist. I think there is evidence for gods. I may experience some, but I cannot come to believe there's no God. I believe there's no God. That's perfectly consistent. There's nothing inconsistent about what he just said at all. Icarus believes there's no God. Icarus, would you say there's no evidence for a God? I'm just curious. But most of the atheists who listen to me, they're the atheists. They're trying to convince people there is no God, and they hold there is no God. They're not just lack of belief atheism. They reject the definition that you're using of lack of belief. They find it to be puerile. They find it to be ambiguous. They find it to be inconsistent or logically vacuous or axiologically devalued. And I have all these in my writings. I would really be honored if you'd read my stuff there, Creaky, because philosophers are not going to take you seriously when you use this kind of rhetoric. It's just, come on, up your game, man. You're smarter than this. Creaky, you're funny. You're smart. You're brilliant, dude. Don't dive down to these depths of philosophy. They're using flat earth level stuff because it doesn't look good. It doesn't look good for the non-believer, which I am. Tribalism here, buddy. I'm in your group. I'm a non-believer, but I'm not an atheist. I don't hold any position on the direct position on the topic. I do not accept there's a God, but I don't accept there isn't a God. But you can't label me an atheist because that's not atheism in philosophy, for generally speaking. You can't say by definition I'm an atheist because that's wrong. You're doing the same thing a theist would say by definition of Romans 18, you're a theist. Don't play that game. Come on. Like I said, Creaky's a smart dude, man. Philosophy is not his jam, obviously, but yeah.
I still won't like him, but I would accept that he was real. God. Childhood cancer? Good job. If that was you. It wasn't, but if it was, it would just make you an evil scumbag.
The atheist
And I don't got a problem with that view. Look, if there is a God, and look, even in the Gnostic position, where the God that exists of this world, the great Demiurge, is an evil God, it would be consistent. There's a lot of crappy things about God that just doesn't make sense about the evidential problem of evil, right? I mean, why does this particular world have the exact amount of gratuitous evil in it that it does? I have no idea. Why does God allow all these things? I have no idea. It would make sense from the Gnostic point of view, because the Gnostics believe that this universe was created by an evil being, a dishonest being. Like I said, his name went by the name Yaldabaoth. And so that's kind of consistent with Gnostic literature. It's consistent with the Old Testament as well, because there's a difference between the God of the Old Testament and the New Testament, it seems, right? The God of the Old Testament is vengeful, vain, evil, malignant. But the God of the New Testament is much more loving and kind and caring. They don't seem like the same being. And the Gnostics would argue because they're not. But it would make sense to say, look, yeah, he's a bad being. I don't want to worship him. Okay, but you might be forced into it. You know, people do worship things forcefully because of not there's ramifications. But doesn't mean you have to like it, right? That I agree with Creaky on. If the Old Testament, the way a lot of people describe it, if it's true, that would be an evil God, especially when you send people to hell merely for not believing. That's not just. That's not justice. And, you know, sacrificing, you know, like the story of the general that we talked about earlier, Jephthah, that said, you know, grant me this win against the Ammonites, and the first thing I see when I get home, I'll offer and sacrifice. And I guess he was thinking about, you know, a goat or burnt offerings or whatever. But the first thing that walks out this door is his daughter to greet him on his win. This is in the Bible. This is in the Bible. And so he fulfills his promise to God that he kills his daughter is the first thing he sacrifices. I'm sorry, but that kind of being, that's evil. That's evil. I wouldn't want to worship that God either. Would I, out of fear? Yeah. But that doesn't mean I'm going to believe that being is just, right?
atheist has the responsibility to answer this question because he made the claim.
Is saying that there is no evidence for something making a claim?
Yes. Really, Creaky, trust me on this. I challenge you. Go ask anybody who knows anything about philosophy or epistemology. Not one of them was going to tell you otherwise. Absolutely, it's a claim, dude. A claim is something where you state something is a fact that comports with reality. That's what a claim is. And even though a belief and a claim are not exactly interchangeable, there's a lot to do with speech act theory and psychological states. But when you're saying you believe something, you're upholding that it is the state of affairs is the case. You're holding that claim to be the case. So yes, the proposition, and think about it this way, Creaky. Beliefs are predicated upon it is a proposition. So the predication is a proposition. Specifically, belief is a intentional belief, a verb, and it's an intentional state to be had. An intentional state means that something you believe must be the case, or not the case, or basically you believe something. So intentionality, it always has to be the something, right? I believe this. I think that. I want this. These are intentional verbs. And so when you're saying the proposition is there exists evidence of God, right? That statement is either true or false. The theist is going to say it's true. Okay, not all. A fetus might not, but Christians, generally a Christian will say, yeah, there's evidence for God. So they're going to hold that proposition as true, right? But not all atheists hold that proposition as false, because atheism is not contingent upon holding that proposition as false. Atheism is not contingent upon if there's evidence of God or not. So some atheists might say, yeah, that proposition is false. There is no evidence of God. Some atheists might say it's true. Doesn't mean they don't have a position that differs from that as far as like that they will believe there's no God. But I think most atheists are going to say the proposition there's evidence for God is true. I hold that position is true, and I'm agnostic. So what? I think very few atheists will say that proposition there's evidence for God is false. I think very few would. I really do. And the ones that do, the follow-up question would be, do you know anything about philosophy? Probably most of them would say.
Really? And yeah, I know I'm claiming that there is no evidence, or am I? Or am
You
I
are.
just pointing it out? If there was a claim being made, that claim would need to be, we have not seen any evidence that shows us that God is real. And
No, you have not seen any evidence that God is real. I have no convincing evidence that God is real. There's evidence, but it's not convincing, obviously, because it's a tautology. To say I don't believe because I don't believe is tautological. If I say I don't believe because I'm not convinced, that's tautological. If I say I'm not believed because I haven't been shown evidence to convince me, that's tautological. Because if I had shown evidence to convince me, I would believe, assuming epistemic consistency, right? I can say, yeah, I've shown evidence that God exists, but I choose not to believe. That's inconsistent. That's called a peculiar reason, or Moore's paradox. The statement, it is raining outside, but I do not believe it's raining outside, is not incoherent. It is actually inconsistent, but it's not incoherent. But yeah, it's grammatically sound though to say that. So he's just making it about him. He's making that sense that he hasn't been shown any evidence. Okay, well, so what?
what's the problem with that? Apart from the obvious problems for Christian apologists.
Well, the next question would be though, Creaky, have you been shown evidence there is no God? That's what I want to know. So I don't know if Creaky's ever going to watch this or not. I've tagged him, but if he ever watches it, the questions I want to know is: one, do you believe there is no God? And two, do you have any evidence there's no God? Whether you're making the claim or not. I'm not asking you whether you make the claim. I'm asking you, do you think there's evidence there are no gods? Big difference, right? I think there's evidence there's no gods. I think there's evidence there is gods. How you weigh them is how you get to your position. So I would like to know, is there evidence there is no God? And again, that doesn't mean he has to believe there isn't a God, but I'm just kind of curious.
Even when someone says he's perfectly agnostic, he can still have the burden of proof.
You really don't understand what the burden of proof means to you.
Actually, both kind of off, but Creaky, here's the thing. Again, agnostics have a burden of proof, buddy. I'm sorry, man, but they do. Go read the literature. Go read Dr. Michael Martin. Go read Dr. Malik. Dr. Malik points it out in his book, his paper, A Defense of, A Defense of the Burden of Proof of Atheism or something. I can't remember the name of the paper. I did a review on it too, so I'm sorry. But yeah, these experts do hold that agnosticism has a burden of proof. To be undecided has a burden of proof. And I've shown this logically in a actual logical modus ponens using a second order burden of proof justifications. So yeah, it's not inconsistent to say that if you don't believe you have a burden of proof. it does in philosophy and epistemology, because the literature seems to indicate that as well. Even, like I said, Michael Martin, who was a huge advocate of negative atheism, to only have atheism as a lack of belief, said to people, in order to even do that, it should be justified. If not, you're holding on to something, the status of, oh, I'm not justified to believe there's no gods or there is a God, and you don't have that. You don't have that as a rational position to have. What is your justification for not believing? In order to have a rational stance, even in fence sitting, right? Even in between the belief that even if theism is God exists and atheism is God does not exist, then the agnostic is sitting right there in the middle, fence sitting. I have to have a reason why I'm sitting on the fence, if I want to be rational.
And I'm not explaining it again. Christian apologists are the ones claiming that God really exists, and by definition, the burden of proof is on them.
No. Again, Creaky, I got to ask you, what have you ever read about the burden of proof? Because right now you're just parroting ACA stuff, Aaron Ross stuff. Nothing you've said is anywhere in line with the academic literature and epistemology on the burden of proof. Nothing. In fact, even Dr. Richard Carrier, who, I'm not a mythicist. We don't agree on a lot of stuff. He wrote 2 blogs on me, 2 full blogs on his website on me on this very subject, and even he agreed atheists have a burden of proof. Even if you lack a belief, he believes atheists have a burden of proof. But he goes one step further, where he loses me and I lose him. He believes that burden of proof has already been met. Dr. Richard Carrier, if you go read his blog on me, again, he has 2 entries. And he gets my position wrong, completely wrong. And he never fixed it, by the way. I did talk to him about it. I said, look, you got my position wrong, dude. And he never fixed it, but whatever. Be that as may, he holds it as science. Like, for example, the burden of proof for a scientific theory, like evolution or relativity, has already been met in science. I agree with that. Okay, for somebody to come along and say, look, evolution is false, you do have the burden of proof to show it's false. There is nothing left to be had as far as the burden of proof in science. From a scientific point of view, you still have a burden of proof of why you believe it to be true. If you believe evolution is true, you have a burden of proof to yourself why you hold it that way. It can be minuscule. Why hold it that way? Because, I'm not an expert in the field, but according to these expert scientists that have all, come to the conclusion that evolution is true, and I'm just going to rely on them to believe it. Okay. Don't we do that with doctors? If a doctor says you have, I've ran all these series of tests that you don't understand, and they come up with you have this very specific disease, most people are going to believe them. Why? Because they're the experts. You may not know what the hell the disease even means. You have no idea. You're not the expert. You know what tests they've done or what they mean. But if a doctor tells you have this particular disease, most people are going to believe them. Not all. Some will say, well, that's second opinion, right? But you're not the expert there. You're going to believe them because they're the experts. And the experts in science of biology, it's 99.7%, that evolution is true. It's probably even higher than that when it comes to the theory of evolution, of relativity, right? Most, if not all physicists accept relativity is true. Right? It's been confirmed. But you don't have to study Maxwell's equations and tensor formulas and Einstein's equations and know anything about energy density or any of this stuff to say, yeah, relativity is true because, that's the confirmed model right now. And I'm going by the experts. Okay, fine, whatever. I would hope that you get a little more detail, but you don't have to. So the burden of proof is different in science. And I think what Creaky's making a mistake is he's trying to take how things are thought of in science and how they're thought of in law and try to make them normative in epistemology. And it just doesn't work that way, man.
I know they wish it was on us, but it isn't.
It is.
And it doesn't matter how many different ways you try to manipulate the definition of atheism, it won't change anything.
It's not manipulating anything. These are called sound epistemological principles. That's what that I would put them as, sound epistemological principles. That if you want to have a belief that's rational, or even a non-belief that's rational, a position of why you are in a certain set, that needs to be justified. And it doesn't even have to do anything to do with definitions. It has to actually do with set theory, mathematics. In any universal set, you have a subset. We'll call that A. You have a complement of that subset. We'll call that A prime. So all things that are not set A fall into A prime. Those combined together as a union form U, the universal set. it's not even a union. I'm sorry. It's the yeah, no, it's a union. Yeah, it's not an intersection. It's a union. Yeah, so it is a union. So anything that's not set A isn't set not A. Theist, not theist. Dog, not dog. So if I look at the set of theists, so all things, elements in that set, that's going to be all people that believe there's some type of God. If you don't hold that position, you're not a theist. You're not in that set. You're in the set of not theist. Right? Why are you in the set of not theist? Now, one could argue a perfunctory answer, basically. Oh, well, I'm not in the set of not theist because I'm not in the set of theist. Okay, sure. That is true. But that doesn't tell me anything. I already know that. That's tautological. You're in the set of not theist because you're not in the set of theist. Sure. But that's so trivial. That's a trivial answer. You know? Why are you not short because I'm tall? It's just perfunctory, right? I mean, it's just nothing. So yeah, I want to know why you're in the set of not theist. That means reasons why you you can't accept theism. That's what it is. It's set theory, dude. It has nothing to do with redefining anything or definitions.
There is still no evidence for God's existence.
Maybe you've carefully weighed all the evidence and came to this conclusion.
What evidence? There is no evidence.
So even like a very general thing, I'm sorry, but 2 billion people believe in God. Billions have died in the name of God. Now, maybe that's not direct evidence of a God, but there might be evidence there that these people believe in something for some reason. What is it? Why is it they believe that? That's a lot of people. That's not merely just people believing in the tooth fairy. Why is it that people are willing to die for these beliefs? It is evidence. It's testimonial evidence. It may not be strong evidence to you, but if you go to a court of law and 2 billion people witness somebody stabbing somebody, that's sufficient to convict them. That is sufficient to convict them. 2 billion people. Right? You only need 2, maybe, in a court of law that will testify they witnessed something. It's evidence. Testimonial evidence. And of course, you have the testimony of the Gospels in the Bible. Now, again, you don't have to believe them. You don't have to believe them. You can think the 2 witnesses are lying. You can think they're not credible. You can just say, it's just not convincing to me. But he used onus per blinde earlier in the court of law. And he's talking about using the court of law analogy, but in the same token, 2 witnesses is sufficient to convince a jury or a judge of your guilt. Right? In most places, it only takes word of one, the police officer. If a police officer says you ran a red light, in most places that's sufficient. That's called evidence. Yeah, it's 2 billion Christians, but it's probably, like I said, 3 billion or more that believe in some kind of Judeo-Christianic type God, Jews, Muslims, and Christians. But no, I'm just talking about the Christians. Yeah, I know. I said earlier there's probably a lot more than that, probably closer to 3 billion, if I had to guess. And it's Frida said, I read Richard Spunked in the Hair Carrier's blog about you the other day. I can't stand the guy. Did you read? Look, I get nothing against Richard. We get along. But he did the same thing against me that he did against Bart Ehrman. He just twisted our arguments and strawmanned us, and he's famous for that. Richard Carrier is famous for strawmanning people. You don't believe me? Go ask anybody he's ever had debates with. That's his style. It really is. But, whatever. Like I said, I got nothing personal against Richard. We always got along.
If you say, I've looked into the evidence and as a result I'm completely agnostic about God's existence, then you have the burden of proof to show what evidence brought you to this conclusion.
I agree with him on that. As an agnostic, I'm agree with him. What evidence got me to believe, the position? And again, I'm not strictly, in the middle, but what is it about, the evidence for God and the evidence for lack of God that hasn't convinced me? I'm happy to talk about that. That's a different topic, though, right?
Oh my God, this guy literally understands nothing. That's the problem. There is no evidence for atheists to look at.
But you're just saying that by fiat, man. That's just not a good argument, man. Because obviously they have stuff they're looking at. They have these arguments. I mean, have you ever looked into the ontological arguments? Have you looked into the contingent arguments? Have you argument from aesthetics? I mean, granted, you don't have to accept them. But to say they've never been, Aquinas has 5 ways, right? Argument from, prime mover, argument from first cause. Those are evidence that could be used for a theist. To say there's none, I think he's conflating things. I think he's trying to say there's no scientific evidence. That's what I think he's trying to do. And in that case, he's right. There is no scientific evidence for God, but there's no scientific evidence there isn't God because science cannot address the question of God. They're prohibited to. 1, because of the adherence to methodological naturalism, and 2, because I believe in non-overlapping magisteria, the way Gould would put it. Timothy Gould. So, yeah, God, but he's not talking, he doesn't ever say scientific evidence, so I think he's being a little coy there, because I think he's talking about scientism, but...
Mainly because there is no evidence at all, and that's why atheists don't believe in God. So evidence is the available body of facts and information.
But here's the thing, though. Like, let me try this example, Creaky. Let's say I want to know the explanation of why kids get presents for Christmas. More specifically, how did this Christmas present get under the tree? Well, look at one hypothesis. That Santa Claus, has pulled them all around and, delivered them, to the children over the night. Okay, that's consistent with that hypothesis. That is evidence towards that hypothesis. That is evidence. You see. If I want to say the hypothesis that Santa exists, and I see Christmas presents underneath the tree, that's evidence that Santa exists. It really is, dude. Is it strong evidence? No. But then you say, okay, what other things are this consistent with? Well, it's consistent with what I would expect if parents bought presents for their kids to put underneath the tree. It's consistent with that hypothesis as well. Which hypothesis has the least amount of entities or axioms? Well, clearly the one with the parents, right? Because if you start talking about Santa, there's many more other things you have to get into. So, abductively, what is more likely? Parents or Santa? Have we seen parents do it before? Yes. We've never seen Santa. Well, I've never seen Santa, but I've seen parents do it. I've been a parent. I'm still a parent, obviously. So, yeah, what is more likely? Hypotheses. This is, again, going with Occam's razor, law of parsimony. This is when you would use it. Matter of fact, you more use it when 2 competing hypotheses are exactly alike. You take the one with the least amount of assumptions. In this case, you don't even get that far. Which one has the least amount of assumptions, period? Which one is more parsimonious with what we have experienced in real life? The parents. So this is why I don't accept the Santa hypothesis. But to say there's no evidence for it, that's philosophically naive. Because the same evidence for the parents doing it is the same evidence for Santa doing it, because both of them are evidence of what we would expect for the hypotheses. See, Creaky doesn't think like a philosopher. Creaky thinks like a science guy. Okay? And my position is I think like both. I love science. He knows I'm an avid anti-flat earthers. I agree with him. Flat earthers are the dumbest among the dumb. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't get philosophy either. And I think Creaky makes a huge mistake here. And I think he doesn't understand burden of proof either, criticizing the thinking judgment. But yeah, look, April met Santa at the mall. There you go. She thought he'd be taller. Yeah, she's short dude. But again, these are philosophical concepts about evidence, not scientific evidence, which is completely different. Those are experimental. Those are evidential. Empirical.
Indicating whether a belief or proposition is true or valid. So tell me again, what evidence is actually available that proves God is real?
You see what he just did there, though? Creaky, you just did something that's very, very intellectually dishonest, I think. You shifted from justification to why somebody has the belief to that actually proves. Not many people will say there's a proof that God exists. I don't think many. Some fringe theists do. Sure. Some fringe atheists say there's proofs God doesn't exist. I've looked at them all. None of them are convincing to me. Many of them are valid, but they're not convincing. They're not sound. I can find errors with the premises. But look at the jump here. He's talking now that proves. He's saying the evidence. There's no evidence, and he says no evidence that proves. Those are vastly different claims.
So evidence is the available body of facts and information indicating whether a belief or proposition is true or valid.
Okay, that a proposition is true or valid. if something is evidential, whether a proposition is true or valid, we're looking at it as a consistent with what we expect. We're not looking for a mathematical proof. And he's using proof here as, I think, proof, not just evidence. At least it seems that way. If he's using it as evidence, okay, like he was before, but even still, there is evidence Santa exists. It's just not convincing because it's not parsimonious what we know about, reality. Now, I will say there's no scientific evidence for God, sure, but that's a different claim.
So tell me again, what evidence is actually available that proves God is real?
There's absolutely no scientific evidence.
If there was,
See right there, Sheldon says there's no scientific evidence. That's different domain of discourse. He's moving from philosophy to scientism, and I don't agree with that. And also, to say, look, there's absolutely no proof that there's God, that nobody has proven God exists one way or another. Okay, but that's not the same thing as having evidence towards one way or another. There's a big difference there, man.
any actual evidence, then Christian apologists like you would be ramming it down our throats. Funny though, that never seems to happen. I wonder why that could be.
Then it is true, you don't have the burden of proof.
That's what I've been trying to explain to you. We know. It's you that seems to have the difficulty understanding that.
Well, I think both of you do, man. I don't agree with the thinking Dutchman's either on burden of proof. But as somebody who actually reads literature on this stuff, both of you have burden of proof, dudes. I'm sorry, but this misunderstanding of you have a burden of proof from the ACA and American Atheist, Creaky, I don't know any philosopher that would agree with you. I really don't. I don't know any epistemologist that would agree with you. And if you're talking about atheism, you're talking about beliefs being true or false, you're in that domain. You're in the domain of philosophy. You're in the domain of logic. Your domain, that literally is logic when you talk about something being true or false. It's Boolean logic. You're in that domain. And Creaky, I'm sorry, dude. I really am, because God, I do like you, man. And your flat Earth stuff is great, but your philosophy here is crap. It's shit, dude. It really is. And if you don't believe me, which I probably expect you don't, and you know I'm not a Christian. This is for this. Well, by the way, the guys before, this is for Ghost. This is a satanic band, okay? So I don't give a shit of what people think. I happen to like satanic music, but. Do I believe that Satan exists? No. And by the way, some people go like, well, Ghost isn't true satanic. Well, I know that. Well, neither was Slayer. So what? I like Slayer. But I happen to love Ghost. This is the symbol for Ghost. People don't remember. But anyways, so I'm definitely not a Christian, dude. I'm telling you, go find a philosopher. Go find an epistemologist and run what you just said about burden of proof to them. And I would like to meet that person that agrees with you because I've never met one.
Not us.
But then you should be consistent and not enter into a discussion pretending to know things about it. It doesn't make sense to on the one hand claim to be totally ignorant about a certain subject, and on the other hand pretend to know things about that subject. That's inconsistent.
That really was stupid. Give me a minute.
Well, I don't know. I mean, again, I'm not sure what the thinking Dustman's referring to. I don't think Creepy Blinder has said he's completely ignorant of a subject. Do I think he's heavy in philosophy? No, not from what I've seen. But I don't know what he was saying that he doesn't know something, as opposed to he can't pontificate on it. I think the thinking Dutchman may have overreached on that one.
I've got to compose myself and work out what the hell he meant.
3 hours later.
I haven't really got it anywhere.
Yeah, I don't know
Let's
either.
move on.
Yeah, I have to agree with Creaky on that one. I don't know what he meant by it. I just don't. Maybe you guys can figure it out. But when Creaky says, like, look, I'm not claiming any knowledge about God, he's saying that he has no statements that he's going to put into the knowledge category about God. But the knowability of God is a completely different question too, by the way. So don't conflate the two. But that doesn't mean that he can't talk about these subjects. He can talk about burden of proof. Then other people can make the determination whether he knows what he's talking about on it. I made the determination. I don't think he has a clue about burden of proof, but he thinks he does. But why is it that the people that know about burden of proof, that study the topics, that read the literature, probably wouldn't agree with him?
How much do you need to know about God to say that you don't accept he's real? If on the
Quite a bit. I mean, you'd probably have to understand a lot of things about the arguments about God to say that he's not real, or don't accept that he's real, because you got to know what you're not accepting. Look, putting aside the Christian values or the Christian versions of God, there's only a few possibilities of how we came about to exist, the existence of the universe. One of which is by some kind of intentionality. Another one is some kind of necessary being. Those are not mutually exclusive, but nor are they the same thing. The universe kind of came about by necessity, a necessary being that has no intentional states whatsoever. Quantum fluctuations are necessary beings in that case. Okay? So a necessary being is something that must exist in all possible worlds. That's all. But there might be a necessary being that has an intentionality, has intentional states, like God. That is a possibility, of course. And so when you're getting into the philosophy of why we are here, because science doesn't ask the question why we are here. It can't ask the question. Science asks the question of what is it we're observing? How do we explain what we're observing? But the question of why we exist in the first place, why there's even something to observe, is not a scientific question. It is a philosophical question. Right? Science doesn't say, why is there even something to observe in the first place? That is outside the dominion of science. That falls into philosophy. Ansfrey says, for satanic music, I think Behind the Wall of Sleep, NIB, I love that, by the way, yeah. On Black Sabbath's first album, phenomenal, not to mention the title track, yeah. That album just had by the way, had an anniversary not too long ago. But yeah, I happen to love Black Sabbath's first album. I'm a huge Black Sabbath fan with Ozzy and also with Dio, but also with Jonan Turner, also with Glenn Hughes. I mean, just Iommi and Ward, and it's amazing. But anyway, sidetracking. Go ahead.
On the other hand, there were bags of evidence, and then we were still saying we didn't believe he was real. We would need to know a lot about the topic.
But why does it matter what you believe or don't believe to a theist if you're not going to try to have a discussion with them? If you just say, look, you're not convinced me, most theists are going to move on and going to find somebody they can convince. You have done nothing. You've done nothing to change anything. Right? It's just you're not doing anything productive by saying you don't believe them. The theist would just say, who cares? I don't give a shit. I'll go find somebody else to convince. Right? If you tell me A equals A does not equal A, and I'm going to tell you I don't believe you, right? I'm going to say you're full of crap because A equals A. Either you're going to convince me that A equals A or A does not equal A, or you can just walk away. I'd hope that you walk away because there's nothing you can probably do to convince me A does not equal A. But the point being is that the theist is not there to convince you. Now, you can say, well, the Great Commission. God had commanded theists to go around and convince people. Okay, whatever. But not all theists think the same way. And some theists might say, well, okay, God's has commanded me to go spread the word, but if you don't want to listen to it, I'll go to another door to knock on, so to speak, metaphorically and figuratively, depending on your religion. So you're not doing anything to add to the dialogue just by merely saying that I don't believe you. I don't believe them either, but I have reasons why I don't believe them, and I'll just happily discuss those reasons. I have videos on the logical problem of evil, the evidential problem of evil, problem of divine hiddenness. I give reasons. I don't sit there and just say I don't believe you.
There isn't. So if you ask me, the only thing I need to know is that I don't accept that God exists.
Yeah, it's 50 years in 2020 from the NIB album. Amazing, right? I mean, Black Sabbath album with NIB. That was one of the songs on there.
Of course, it is never inconsistent to simply ask questions. If a Hindu comes up to you and says, reincarnation is a fact, you are perfectly reasonable to ask, why do you think that?
Yeah,
right. So it's acceptable to ask a Hindu why they believe in reincarnation, but it isn't acceptable to ask a Christian apologist why they believe in God.
No one's ever said that. Creaky, why would it not be acceptable? It would be more than acceptable. You're a Christian apologist? Great. Why do you believe in God? Same reason, hey, Creaky, you're an atheist. Why is it you don't believe in God? Those are the same exact things as far as asking questions. If you're allowed to ask a question of one, why can't I ask the same question of you? Why is it you don't believe in God? And just say that you've not been convinced, that's not informative. That's a non-answer. That's tautological. You say there's no evidence, that's tautological. Well, okay, that's not tautological, but it's non-informative. Not tautology, but it's definitely non-informative. Because there may be no evidence of certain things, but we still believe them. Why is it you believe external minds exist? There's no evidence external minds exist, because any evidence external minds exist can also be used to show that internal minds, external minds don't exist. If I say, why is it you believe reality is real? Any evidence that reality is real also shows it's not real. You can use it either way. As I should say more to idealism versus realism. There's property-based beliefs that cannot be shown either way, because any evidence for one is also evidence to the other. But we still believe them, right? I believe in induction, for example, will work day after day after day, right? I believe tomorrow we can still use logic and reason and induction to derive things. Why? Because I have to as a condition of rationality. I can't justify it, because in order to justify the use of induction, I have to use induction, the very thing that I'm trying to justify. That's circular. But I still believe it. There's no evidence induction is going to work tomorrow. No evidence possible that induction will continue to work. Why? Because that evidence is predicated on the use of induction, which makes that proof circular. But we still believe it. So, I got a super chat. April, $5 Canadian. As a fan of Creepy Blinder Dude, I don't watch for his philosophy. I get that. I really do. I watch for the rants. Speaking of rants, I miss the Drunk Monkey. I don't remember him, but yeah, no, I get you. Look, like I said, I am a fan of Creaky Blinder. I really am. I mean, I like what he does. I like how he shits on flat earthers. But this to be consistent, hold yourself to a higher level, Creaky. Don't dive down, because right now you're as far as philosophy, you're on the flat Earth level, right? You're saying things are just incongruent with established philosophical understandings and normatives. So don't do it. Up your game, because like I said, he's smarter than this. I happen to like Creaky doing. Most people don't watch him philosophy. They certainly don't watch Aaron for his philosophy, because Aaron sucks at philosophy. But I think Aaron is incapable at this point of growing. I think Creaky can grow, and I think he'd become more formidable if he starts learning a little more about these philosophical topics.
Double standards much?
And if that person says, prove me wrong, then you can say, no, I don't have to. I didn't make a claim, you did.
Exactly. And that's
Well, that's burden shifting. Look, if you make a claim and you say the other person has to prove you wrong, that by definition is burden shifting, but that's not what's going on here. Look, if a theist says God exists and they say prove that he doesn't, that's burden shifting. When an atheist says God does not exist, prove that he does, that's burden shifting, but that's not what's going on here. It is somebody saying theists believe there's God, I'm not accepting that. Okay, I don't have to prove there's no God or there's a God, but what I do have to justify is why I didn't accept. That's the burden of proof in epistemology. Creaky, that is called a burden of proof. Some people call it burden of justification, but that's what it's understood. That's what the phrase is understood in philosophy. We're not talking about a court of law. We're talking about philosophy. In philosophy, the burden of proof is to justify your position, not to prove something. So if I say my position is I'm sitting on the fence between theism and atheism, the burden of proof I have as to why I'm sitting on the fence.
why when you ask an atheist to prove that God isn't real, they don't need to, because they didn't make the claim.
Creaky, you can't speak for all atheists. But the atheists that follow me make the claim. Almost all of them do. They're happy to make the claim. They're like, hey, yeah, gods are BS. Gods don't exist. Let me tell you why. You can't speak for them. Those are the atheists going out there going, stop this lack of belief bullshit. It's just stupid. It's puerile. It's June, man. As my buddy here likes to say, Timo, it is. Stop it. Just stop.
You need to give me evidence. But it would not be reasonable to pretend to know things about reincarnation when that is actually not the case. Maybe you have never investigated this subject, but you do claim there's no evidence for reincarnation. The Hindu is right to ask, how do you know that?
Well, no, what I would say is reincarnation would be something I would think could be studied if it exists. I would say there's no scientific evidence for reincarnation. There's no biological evidence for reincarnation. But these are not just philosophical claims. This is claims about ontology. This is claims about people being, born renew. These things that should be testable. There's evidence that people have seemed to have things that they probably shouldn't know about as a kid. We don't know where they come from. They could be just things they pick up. So any kind of evidence for reincarnation is minimal at best, I would say. You could, but there's no scientific evidence. And that's the distinction. I'm not going to say there's no evidence for something. If there's something out there that at least makes you investigate. Because once you're investigating, you investigate the evidence. Right? And so you just have to be really careful in the uses of the terms, I think. And I think a lot of people don't recognize that they're using evidence in the scientific sense. There's no evidence that reincarnation is the case, but they're talking about it in the scientific sense. In the philosophical sense, completely different, right? If there is evidence in the philosophical sense, it's minimal at best. I don't know of any, but whatever. I mean, I haven't really looked into Hinduism nor reincarnation.
The honest thing you could say would be,
Now you're starting to get the point. The honest thing to say would have been that I have never seen any evidence that shows me reincarnations are true, which is why, when you ask an atheist why they don't believe in God, the honest answer is the same, because they have never seen any evidence that demonstrates that he's real.
But now he's moved into demonstration, right? We're not talking about having to demonstrate something. We're talking about justification. And again, most of the atheists that follow me will say, yeah, sure, there's evidence for God. It hasn't been demonstrated. They're not claiming it's been demonstrated. If it's been demonstrated there's no God, it'd be seeming to be rational to believe there's no God, right? But I still don't know Creaky's position. Creaky, does God exist? That's all I want to know. Does God exist? I'm not asking about your belief state at that point. I'm asking about your position on an ontological question. Does God exist? A theist can answer yes. What is your answer to it? Because atheism is the belief on that question. It has always been the belief on that question, called the Great Debate question: does God exist? And there's only two direct answers: yes or no. There's indirect answers. I do an indirect answer. I have no direct answer on it. But a person who answers no is an atheist, are they not? And it's not they're an atheist merely because they lack a belief. It is an atheist because they're making the claim there's no God. They're saying no. That's why they're an atheist. The atheism is contingent because of both a necessary and sufficient condition. The lack of belief is merely a necessary condition for atheism. I hold it as insufficient in philosophy. Because the sufficiency condition, because strong atheism is a subset of weak atheism, the sufficiency condition is the belief that God does not exist. Now, do I hold that to everybody? No, you hold your own schema, but that's the schema that I hold. Okay? And that almost everybody that ever read in philosophy holds.
You do realize that you're invalidating your own argument, don't you?
I'm not aware of any evidence for reincarnation. Maybe you can enlighten me?
Ah, right. So it's perfectly acceptable for a Christian apologist to ask a Hindu for proof of reincarnation, but somehow it's unacceptable for an atheist to ask a Christian apologist for proof of God's existence.
Since there are many agnostic atheists out there who do argue vigorously against God, they are inconsistent and need to be honest and state what they do believe instead of claiming that they just lack belief.
Yeah, I agree with that, absolutely. But here's the thing. Put forth your positions. Your positions are not dependent upon anybody else. You have your reasons for why you have particular positions. There should be nobody else around having to do with anybody else. And I should be able to ask Creaky, what is your position on this? What is your position on God existence? And him telling me he lacks belief does not tell me his position, just telling me he's a non-theist. Okay? Because if I can ask the same question, hey Creaky, what is your position on the proposition there is no God? Do you just merely lack a belief that there is no God? Because I'd like to know. If you have a lack of belief either way, there's a term for that in philosophy. It's called agnostic on P. Agnostic on the proposition. So I want to know what is your position on the proposition, Creaky? There's no God. Do you hold that to be true? Do you hold it to be false? Or you're agnostic on that proposition. You have no belief on it. You have no belief either way. Right? Because there are atheists out there that make the claim there's no God, obviously, right? So let's make the hypothesis out there, or the proposition out there. God does not exist. That's my proposition to you, Creaky. God does not exist. What's your position on that? Do you believe that's true? Do you believe it's false? Or you have no position either way? Which is agnostic. But if you just tell me you lack a belief in the proposition God does not exist, that doesn't tell me whether you lack a belief either way or an agnostic, or if you're a theist. Because a theist also will not take that position to be true. Right? See the problem? If you lack a belief in the proposition God does not exist, if you just lack a belief in the non-existence of God, you could be a theist or you could be agnostic like me, and I don't know. It's ambiguous. See the problem now, Creaky? Make sense? Think about it. It'll come to you. If you're not, come get a hold of me, man. I'd love to chat with you, dude. We can have a beer and kick it and be completely off air and we talk about it.
Oh, for fuck's sake. You're trying to portray atheists as some sort of evil organization that actively goes out and spreads the word about God's non-existence.
No! Well, they're not evil, but a lot of atheists I know do that. What do you think the atheist community of Austin used to be? Now they're not. Now they're just a bunch of pansies. But community of Austin used to tell people why God does not exist. Matt Dillahunty believes there's no gods. Aaron Robb believes there's no gods. Arndt even goes so far to says he knows there's no gods. Yes, that's what they do in debates. They try to convince atheists there's no God. Why not? Have fun. I find those to be entertaining. Not my shtick. I'm not interested in having a dog in that fight, but I find it interesting. But yes, the atheist, for example, the atheist alliance, the atheist from Atheist for Liberty organization that I kind of help out. They're not really going around trying to convince people there's no God, but they're trying to convince people that secularism is good, that we should have a separation of church and state, and that their type of atheism is contingent on the belief that we shouldn't have a theocracy. I believe in that. I mean, it doesn't mean that of course, atheism has to do with political stuff, but I mean, they're the type of atheists that hold that secularism is the case, and I do as well, or should be the case.
No, that's not what atheism is at all. If it wasn't for people like you, people like me would probably never need to say anything and just continue to go about our lives not believing in God.
April says, you should see him rip on Matt Powell. Oh, that'd be hilarious. Oh, Matt Powell is the scum of the earth. And I would love anybody to rip on Matt Powell. Matt Powell is human garbage. But I would enjoy his less than psychological rants. By the way, he's an atheist to the best of my knowledge. Yeah, I probably would guess. But again, I don't know. I've never talked to a Creepy Blinder on this. But yes, I could tell you right now, Creepy Blinder and I probably both agree, Matt Powell was probably one of the most despicable people on the planet. He's pure evil. So Creaky and I probably agree on a lot of things. I just think we disagree on atheology because but I don't think Creaky Blinder has ever studied anything about atheism. I just don't.
But every time somebody like you tells me that I can't just not believe in God, then you are the one causing discourse.
Well, no, you can be possible just not believe in God. I don't believe in God. But I have to have reasons why I don't believe in God, Creaky.
Like this. Anyway, I just thought I would point out the many hypocrisies in this video. Not really sure why. Well, actually, I am sure. It's because I never know when to shut my mouth.
Me too, buddy. And that's why I'm going to probably end it there because it's a good place to stop. Like I said, I find it entertaining. Obviously, you know, Creaky Blinder is for entertainment purposes. It is satire, and I get that. And I hope he takes this as well. I never want to have beef with the guy. I just don't think he knows anything about philosophy or atheology. And his response would be, what is there to know? And that's what I kind of see with atheists out there. Because there's a huge amount of literature on atheism. It's a fascinating field. I do shows on atheology. If atheists want to learn about atheism, let me know. Go watch my shows on atheology, which I haven't done in a while. Go watch the Real Atheology with Ben. He does a brilliant job just talking about atheism. If you want to go learn about atheism, go to Trolley Dave and Joe over at Answering a Reason, and they'll tell you about atheology. But I'm sorry, American Atheist, Atheist Republic, and the Atheist Community of Austin know fuck all about atheism. And the first question you should to ask them if you want to try to prove that hypothesis is ask an atheist who talks like Creaky. Ask him, what paper have you read about atheism? Can you name me one atheist philosopher? Most of them can't. If they can't name any, if they say, well, how was our paper on atheism? Go read the literature, man. There's whole courses on this subject. Atheism is very vast in the field as far as philosophy. I mean, it's nowhere near like philosophy of mind or anything like that, but there's a lot of papers talking about atheism in the literature. And to say that atheism is merely lack of belief, just to me, just devalues that word atheist. It makes atheism far less valuable for the people that are atheist. And I don't know why anybody would want to do that. I think the people that are atheists that study the subjects, that take the time to learn the arguments and can defeat a theist in their arguments, props to you, man. Because that's making a difference. And I speak from experience on this. Because, as people know, my very first debate was with Wayne Fillmore. And he was a young creationist. If I would have told Wayne, hey, I merely lack a belief that creationism is true, we would never got anywhere. But I told him, no, I just merely lack a belief. It's not that I lack a belief in young creationism. It's young creationism is false. Let me tell you why. And so we had a debate on macroevolution. And he eventually changed his position. Now he accepts macroevolution. He has left young creationism. I made the difference in his life. And he wrote about it on BioLogos. It's still up, BioLogos, how a debate Go look at Biologos, how a debate changed my mind. Steve McRae. Nothing's like that's ever going to happen if all you're trying to do is saying you don't believe. Matter of fact, Creaky, if you tell a flat earther, I don't believe the earth is flat, you think you're going to convince them? No. You give evidence the earth is not flat. You hold the position. You make the claim the earth is not flat, and you're willing to give evidence for it. Why not have the same standards for philosophy? Why not want atheism to be the position there is no God, and then explain to people why God does not exist? Same reason why you explain the earth is not flat. Be consistent on that. That's my recommendation, and that's my review. So let me know what you guys think. I know this went way longer than expected. Thank you for the super chat. If you haven't liked this video, become a subscriber to the channel. You can also leave after the fact super chats now. They're called thank yous, I think they're called. If you leave a thank you and it comes up, because I get a notification, next video I will call it out and I will thank you for it. But all you do is leave a comment. In the comment, you can leave a donation. And that donation is a thank you. And if you like these types of videos, if you like these types of reviews, if you agree, let me know. If you disagree, let me know. And I don't think, like I said, I don't think Creaky's going to watch this. But he watched The Thinking Dutchman, who I happen to like. He's a good guy. The Thinking Dutchman has been on my channel. And like I said, I hope the Thinking Dutch, the Creaky Blinder takes us in stride. Probably a lot longer than he would ever watch. But the takeaways, I think I can glean where I'm coming from. Okay? So with that, guys, good night. And I'll probably see you on the weekend somehow. I'm going to probably do a stream. We'll see. Good night.